how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day. No, he covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day. No, he covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day. No, he covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day. No, he...
Well, that is what we've been saying for quite a while, that this is a crime that has come out of the psychology, but just out of that basic dynamic of looking and coveting. And so why would the coveting not be online as well? We know that he was in the area. Why wouldn't it be online as well? So apologies for me being a little bit late to this live. Hi, everyone. A little bit late, but I literally woke up, saw the news. It's not a competition, but saw the news and then had to go from that to getting everything out. So for those of you who may not know this, People came out with a story about 8 hours ago, and Fox News has come out and sort of repeated that story within the last 3 hours. And you can see it there. Idaho murder suspect Brian Kohberger allegedly spammed one victim with Instagram DMs, right? And I think the important word to bear in mind there is allegedly. I think we've got to talk about, is it legitimate? We start off there and then we take it further. So that's what we're gonna do here. Let's have a look at who is here. Terry Dean, good to see you. Stephanie, not too much typing. Stephanie, take care of that hand. Les Brown, you only live once. Don't you only live twice? Inez Mullins, good to see you. Good to see you, yeah. If my eyes look better, well, they feel better as well. Timmy's lying at my feet. I was going to pick him up, but it's just so hot where I am. Okay, so let's get going with the analysis I put together. So just 18 days after Kohberger's arrest, about 65 days since the incident, we appear to have confirmation for the first time of a real tangible connection between the suspect and one of the victims, right, on Instagram. And so this is the pertinent part. And I think I'm going to bring up that people story. It's from this story. Or is it? I think I've gotten the wrong one here. So see if I can get the right one. So it's this one. Repeatedly messaged one of the victims on Instagram, right? And that's according to a source. Who is that source? And can we rely on that source, right? So that's really what we want to think about before we do anything else. But this is the pertinent part. It's right over there. And I'm going to blow this up just so you can see. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Right, it's this part over here. Now, I'm sure all the creators are doing the same thing, but it is the central, those two paragraphs are the central, what do you call it? It's the new information that has come out. So we've got to examine that and then take it further. So it reads, in late October, very important, is giving us a timestamp. It's not just that there were DMs, right, sometime in the semester. It's quite specific, late October, 2 weeks before the murders, an account that authorities believe belonged to Brian Kohberger, which also means it may not be, but probably it is, right? sent a greeting to one of the female victims, right? Female victims. It wasn't sent to Ethan. And he didn't get a reply. And so he sent several more messages to her. And so he basically said, "How are you?" and did it again and again and again, right? So the question is this a legitimate source? And once we've gotten past that, we'll deal with what the implications are. So let's just spend a little bit of time on that. First of all, what do you guys think? Do you think it's a legitimate source? So Patricia says, I would never assume this weird guy is DMing me would end up in murders. I'm not quite sure if you mean that in terms of your personal experience or whether you sort of projecting into this case. The other side of that is that Kaylee did say she thought she had a stalker. And so online and possibly online and even offline. So I guess the lesson from this case is to sometimes assume that something that just seems random may not be the best thing. Elizabeth says People magazine has established some credibility. Stephanie says I originally saw he followed Kaylee on Instagram. Okay. Someone says 50-50 chance it's reliable, could be real. We're going to deal with what the source was. We're going to deal with who the source is. Diane says, I think it's real. Yet to be seen. I don't know. So kind of right. So let's deal with what we know from what's been revealed here. So it is a tough one. It refers to an unnamed investigator, right? He's not identified. That's always not a good sign. An investigator familiar with the case tells people. Someone actually made quite an interesting comment that investigator could be someone who works for Steve Gonzalez, right? So he would not be part of the gag order that the rest of law enforcement are subject to. I don't know whether I would say that his lawyer is the same as the investigator, because I'm sure the lawyer would simply provide his identity. But I'm just saying it's possible that that investigator is someone who Steve Gonzalez originally hired, right? That's one possibility. The other side to it is if there is a gag order, then that kind of tells you that this could not have come from law enforcement, right? It could not have come from law enforcement unless there was a leak, which I don't. This case has been so closely sort of closed, if I can put it that way, sealed, that you kind of imagine that it's not coming from law enforcement. So saying an unnamed investigator familiar with the case could be anyone. Anyone can really be, well, I'm an investigator familiar with the case. But do you agree the details do sound convincing, don't they? They have the details of when this happened, quite specifically, on what platform, who was targeted, although they don't say who, and then the frequency. It's quite a lot of. It's not like they've only provided 2 of those 4 or 5 aspects. Of course, the bottom line is the proof of the pudding is if we can actually see those DMs, we can see the dates and we can see that they are legitimate. So I want to say, okay, Timmy, it's so hot, but so what I want to say is we don't really have enough to legitimize this information, but if we accept its legitimacy for now, based on how deeply anchored it is in the merits of the case, then where does that take us? And what I mean is, it's always seemed likely that this was the case, that it was one of the victims on the top floor because that's where the killer headed first. But we always did think that there might be some kind of social media connection, right? And so it does make sense. It's a little bit of, the dog chasing its tail. Has this story come about because we expected it to, or has it come about because it is true? It's one of those tough things. Fake news is always like that. It's very hard to say if what you want to hear is coming out because of that, or because it's true because it does sound like it's true. It's one of those tough ones. Patricia says it could be Xana at this point. We're going to deal with that. Okay. So we're basically going to tentatively accept the legitimacy of it and then see where that takes us. So who is it? Who are these messages directed to? And someone said it could be Xana as well. I want to put this image up on screen. Okay, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. Sorry. I'm just looking for the image of Maddie Mogan's boots, because I think that's also important to show you in terms of this. Okay, I'll show that to you in a second. So first of all, not to put too fine a point on it, we are dealing with a her, right? It says that Kohberger, or an account that seemed to be Kohberger, was communicating with a female. So that obviously excludes Ethan. Now, if we return to what we said about coveting.
Covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day.
And in terms of that, right, which is the bedroom that is the most visible from the road? Let me say that again. Of all the bedrooms in that house, on the ground floor, right at the bottom, on the mid floor, think about the one that is below this balcony and the one that is on the other side of the kitchen. And then these two top floor bedrooms, which window would you say is the most visible of all of those bedrooms to someone who's sort of driving by? Does seem that way, right? Does seem that way. So this is Maddie's bedroom here. And I want to look how close. It's almost like within arm's reach. Feels like you could just reach onto that balcony railing if you park there, right? And so I want to quickly show you a video of. I'm not quite sure where it is. Let's try it again. Oh, that page is not. See if I can. I thought it was here. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. Sorry, the one link that I had, they've removed. But you could actually even see Maddie's boots in that window, right over there, right? That's how sort of intimate your knowledge can be of her bedroom. You see the M over there, you see the boots right over there, pink boots as well, right? And so it gives you a very personal glimpse into the person who lives in that room, right? There she is wearing those boots. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to show you was Maddie's actual bedroom, right? So what's the view like from inside? Well, it looks like that. I'm sure you've seen this before. but that's how close that parking lot is from the inside. So you can imagine if someone is parked there or standing there, they can see right in if the curtains are open. And because there's lighting on the inside, look at these lights over here. Because there's lighting on this side, even if the curtains are closed, someone on the outside can probably see inside. They might be able to see silhouettes and movements and all sorts of things. And I must say something that you're going to perhaps laugh, but something that I only figured out now, putting this together, is that there are actually two good vibes lights. There's one in Maddie's room, this one, but there's actually the second one, which is, I think it's downstairs. That's the second one. That is not in Maddie's bedroom. I think that's sort of in the kitchen area, right? So did you guys realize that there are two of these good vibe signs, one over here, I think that's the middle floor, and the other one in her bedroom. And obviously when she goes to sleep, her head is right there by the window. So you can clearly see what is going on the bed because it's right next to the window. Just trying to see, are there two beds in here? Looks like there are two beds here. Okay. Right, so in terms of that question, it's a her that we're dealing with. And if we return to what we said about coveting, seeing someone often who was more easy to see, even the most easy to see inside the house and from the outside, right? Donkey says, I don't think that's Maddie's room at the house. No, actually it is. There's the M. There's the M. I don't know if you can see Boots over there, but there is the M. Okay. Thanks a lot, Gayla. So Yvonne says, I thought the good vibes sign was up in her dorm and then in the living room. Yeah, so when she moves to the house, as far as I know, there are two good vibe signs. That's certainly something I've learned. Granny says, I would think it's Kaylee's room, meaning that's the one that's the most visible. Someone says it doesn't look like the same window. Okay. Okay, so that's quite interesting. So do you think this is not her room with that M on the thing? You don't think that's her room? You don't think that room is looking out there? So which room is this? It kind of stops everything dead. So let's spend some time figuring out which room this is. Maddie's bed was along a different wall. Okay. Should we spend a couple of minutes talking about which room this is? Shall we do that? Her old dorm room. Okay. So old dorm room. Okay. Okay. Well, let's do the following. Let's just acknowledge that the visibility that you see here from the outside in is similar to the visibility into there, right? Do you guys accept that? That again, of all the rooms that you have a similar situation, that if you parked over here, but in the real elevated parking lot, that you would have a similar situation, right? Are you happy with that? Because I'm trying to get on to the next sort of aspect, right? Dealing with this whole thing of how do we begin to covet?
No, he covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day.
Okay, so can we continue? Or do we want to talk about the room for a lot longer? Okay, so let's continue. So let's start with why it could be Kaylee, right? Thanks a lot, Daryl. Let's start with why it could be Kaylee. So Kaylee seems to have told a number of people that she had a stalker, right? She told the manager of a vaping store, and that manager told Brian Enton on camera, right? So that seems legitimate. That has come up in the media narrative repeatedly, and it even came up where I think the law enforcement said something to the effect, I'm not quite sure where this came from, but I think someone said that two people were questioned regarding the whole stalker thing, and they admitted following her out of a restaurant or something, and they were there to pick up girls, and those individuals were cleared. And then the other person that was other people that she confided in were, so obviously Maddie knew about it because Maddie and Kaylee went to the vaping store together, according to that manager, but she also told the manager, her parents. And you get something dealing with that. Well, I thought I took a screen grab of that. Oh, I actually did. So I don't know if you guys are aware, there's this little clip on, there's a clip of this from, I think it's 2020. Yeah, you can see it over there if I take this away. The parents were asked if there was any connection, and then her mother said that we do think that he possibly followed them on Instagram. Notice them, a plural, not Kaylee and not Maddie, them. So they seem to see it as almost that he was following both of them, kind of thing, right? I'm going to play this clip for you in a second. Let me just bring it back. It's obviously clipped from 2020.
Any connection? Do you think that he possibly followed them on Instagram? Do you think that he possibly followed them on Instagram?
Can you guys hear that? It's very
Do you think that he possibly
barely discernible on my side.
Any connection? Do you think that he possibly followed them on Instagram?
Okay, let me play that again. Can you guys hear it? Let's play it again.
Any connection? Do you think that he possibly followed them on Instagram? Any connection? Do you think that he possibly followed them on Instagram? Any connection? Do you think that he possibly followed them on Instagram?
So it's quite interesting, quite vague, followed them, right? Okay. Right. So all of that seems to support the idea that Kaylee may have been the target. Kaylee, of the three female victims, seemed to be the most obviously single and available. Do you agree with that assessment? Obviously more single than Xana, but do you agree that Kaylee seemed to be the most obviously single and available, more obviously single than Maddie? Do you guys agree? Okay, try not to get stuck on the on that aspect. But I mean, you can say it's two different rooms, but the idea is imagine what it would have been like in Maddie's room, right? Again, we can spend, if you like, we can spend half an hour talking about the room. We can do that if you'd like to do that. I'd like to go through this analysis, but if you like, we can if you like, we can just pause everything and talk about the room for a while. Would you like to do that? Let's talk about the room that it belongs to a different dorm, and we can do that if you like. Thanks, Kayla. I honestly think. Thanks a lot, Jamie. I'm just trying to find that I honestly think comment. So that's a really good comment, and I, although it's, I think, feels like it's very politically incorrect to say it, I think a lot of people have been thinking it. Kaylee was beautiful. The question is, what was this person thinking? Not what were you thinking, what was that person thinking? And that is important to acknowledge. No room talk. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so let's have a look. Sorry, there's a comment that I missed here that I really wanted to bring up. Okay, so Kaylee was the most obviously single and available. Do you guys at least agree with that? Let's just get certainty on that. In terms of her Instagram, in terms of if you saw her even at the Grub Street truck and the Corner Club, who was the most obviously available in terms of that? Okay. Let's move forward from the room. I agree. Okay, so think about this from the perspective of someone who's looking on. There are 0 guys on Kaylee's Instagram going back a few years to September 2019, right? Obviously, if a guy is sort of lurking on Instagram in that situation, they are going to be looking, are there any guys in this picture? Are you single? You know, what's the situation, right? And if we go to September 2019, I'll try and show this fairly briefly, but that is the September 2019 post, right? It's of Jack. But since then, for like more than 2 years, there are no guys on Kaylee's Instagram. And that's very different to Maddie's and Xana's. So in that sense, Kaylee's Instagram is quite different. And then the other thing is, I've always believed that the final post about a lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day, we all know it, but let me bring it up anyway. I've always believed that that post is very important, right? That's a very important post. And we are going to come back to that. We are going to deal with that when we deal with the implications. But another question is, do you think Kaylee was the sort of personality who would simply ignore persistent messages? And I acknowledge that is quite a difficult question, because I think there are a lot of people who would just ignore it, right? But let me ask you this in a different way. Do you think who would be, if you have a sense of their personalities, Kaylee seems to be quite friendly and so on, but she doesn't seem to take a lot of nonsense, right? Remember when the cop came with a voice complaint, the noise complaint? She can be quite assertive, right? Of the two, who do you think would be the more assertive? Who would be more likely to not do anything about someone doing this, and who would be less likely? It's quite a tough question, but if Kaylee was trying to sort of move on from being in a relationship with Jack to being available, you might think that she would sort of keep a couple of doors open, if that makes sense. Whereas I don't know if Maddie would, because she seemed to be in quite a serious relationship with her partner. Does that make sense? So Gingeru makes a really good point. She says, I know nothing about Maddie's personality. So that is the bottom line. We really need to know these kids as well as we possibly can to answer that. Pharaoh says, what is the trigger that caused the suspect to act for that night? I'll come to that. I'll come to that a little bit later. Why would being assertive matter? Who had the most defensive wounds? Apparently Kaylee. It's been suggested that it could be Kaylee. Holly says Xana was the most approachable. Okay. We don't know the exact date. Okay. So this is where it gets really difficult, and this is where your criminal psychology, your grasp of that, but also your overall grasp of human behavior, of the identity of the people, not just the victim, but also the perpetrator. So where you get a real inward sense of who the people are you're dealing with. So who would Kohberger imagine is the sort of person that he would want to be with? Let me say that again. Who do you think Kohberger would feel that person suits me, or that person I can see myself being in a relationship with, or whatever it is, right? Who would Kohberger imagine as the sort of person that he'd like to be with, right? Thanks a lot, Faticus. Appreciate it. So that is one of the toughest questions I think we've come up with so far, because that really tests your knowledge of the people that we think we know so well so far, right? Susan says the one most socially proficient. It's an interesting answer. In a way, I agree. But on the other hand, if you're kind of a withdrawn person, do you really want to be with the most gregarious person? Maybe. But it's quite split. Some of you say Maddie, some of you say Kaylee. Becky says only KB would know. Not really. You can start to, if you get to know these people, you can kind of figure it out. Kelly says whichever personality he could dominate. That's definitely an interesting. That's a interesting comment as well. Not sure if I agree, but interesting comment. None of them were attacked in the face. Diane says Kaylee was the queen bee, maybe wanted the queen. Well, as far as I know, Maddie was sort of in charge of the house in a way. I kind of get that impression. I'm not 100% sure of that, though. Bear in mind that one call that was made in terms of the voice complaint, Maddie kind of took responsibility for that. So it's also kind of an interesting question. There you go. But we are going to deal with that, right? Josie says he would like the popular girl. Okay. So my response to that is he seems to be quite a narrow guy, like in the sense that he's a vegan, for example. He is quite OCD. And there's certain things I think he didn't like. I think he would like someone who is, in his mind, also to some extent sort of narrower. How can I put it? It seems like he's fixated with cleanliness and with a certain avoidance of life in a sense. And so I think one's also got to imagine of the residents inside the house, certainly between Kaylee and Maddie, which one slightly touches on that? Maybe in terms of her food choices, maybe in terms of her choices in terms of other things as well. If he'd been stalking for a long time, and we know that he was stalking already in August, so if he's stalking in August, he would have had time enough to observe what is going on, perhaps even what is being eaten and had to drink. And then he would have noticed possibly a difference, like visually, noticed a difference between the two. And I mean, another aspect is, would he have preferred, if he's a drug addict, it's either is or was, would he prefer someone who's more or less sober? That's also kind of a mind bender. That question definitely does a mind job on you, right? Welcome, MR. Okay. Kat says that room is Maddie's dorm room. Okay, we've established that. So, as I say, he seems to have a narrow view, a condescending view of people, whereas Kaylee seemed to be the opposite of that, very fun, very open. Would that mean that he would be attracted to her? Would he be attracted to a very fun, open person, right? Or would he be attracted to someone who was fun and open, but somewhat less so? Daryl says he thinks that it's Kaylee. He mentioned that, blah, blah, blah. It's possible. It's possible. So I think there's a very good chance it is Kaylee, but let's consider that it could be Maddie as well. Okay. Maddie not only worked at the Mad Greek restaurant, she was responsible for its social media. And possibly when, let's not say when, if Kohberger went to the Mad Greek restaurant, and it seems very likely that he did, we know that he didn't go to the corner club because that's what the manager said there. Please stop asking us about that. But if he did go to the Mad Greek restaurant, at this point, we don't know if he did, but if he did, then he very likely encountered Maddie there. And it's possible that if he went there regularly, that he was, he got to know her well enough that he was aware that she was responsible for the social media of the Mad Greek restaurant. Not that that needs to be said, but I mean, I think it is interesting that if you're talking about social media, well, that was actually a dimension to Maddie that extends a little bit beyond Kaylee, right? I also think Maddie's Pinterest tells you a lot more about Maddie than, for example, Kaylee. I think Kaylee may have I don't actually know if Kaylee has Pinterest, but certainly Maddie's Pinterest is quite interesting, and you get to know her in a way better. And so the more that there is for someone to, what's the word? Not chew on, but what does an animal do when they sort of, I think it's called chewing the cud, but just tell that whole idea of chewing on the bone, the more meat there is in terms of social media to fixate on, the better the chance that it would possibly be the one or the other, right? I think. In other words, there's so much time when you're not stalking, when you're not in the area, just to be looking at all the different social media and possibly even start falling in love with this person, right? Haven't you felt feelings of strong feelings based on looking at another person's social media? I just experienced that today. I saw on CNN an Australian young lady who's run 150 marathons in 150 days. And I went from that story to her Instagram. And I thought, what a wonderful, full of life person that is. And I think one of the reasons why I found that so attractive is right now I can't run. I've got a bone bruise in my left knee. And so the fact that she's running so much, that free-spiritedness is so attractive right now. And so maybe in the same sense you had that with Kohberger, but within, instead of running, it's within eating. In other words, he's attracted to something specific in that sense. Bear in mind, he's really thin, right? He's thin, and so isn't he also attracted to this idea of health or beauty or something like that, right? In a way that is somewhat narrow. That's all I'm trying to say. I also think if the Gonzalez family knew for a fact that he was stalking Kaylee on Instagram, I don't think they'd say they. I think they'd say her, something like that. I think they would be more explicit about that. Was Maddie vegetarian? I don't think she was, but I think she worked at a restaurant that certainly catered for that. It is a good question. A lot of you are talking about birthing hips. You know what? I don't know whether he didn't mean that sarcastically, actually as an insult. I don't know whether he meant that as a compliment. I mean, he'd just come out of he'd just been rejected by someone who didn't come out the bathroom. So I kind of think he meant that in a nasty way. I don't think he meant it as a compliment, but who knows? Not vegetarian if you go by Pinterest. Okay. So, as mentioned earlier, Maddie's bedroom looked out on the elevated parking lot. And the reason why I'm showing you that room, I must say, I've actually assumed until now it was the room. So I've definitely learned a little more, you could say not great attention to detail. But if her bedroom is looking out at that elevated parking lot, what I wanted to say, if that good vibes thing was in there, wasn't her bedroom sending out the message good vibes, right? But even though that sign was somewhere else, it was sending out that message, good vibes. Come to this house for good vibes, right? Come to me for good vibes. And think about this. If he came to the area to get high, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit later on. If he came to the area to get high and your eyes are sort of glazing over as those feelings are coming over you, and you see that sign, sort of like a lighthouse guiding you through the fog, that might have felt like a warm, welcoming presence. And who did that sign belong to? Well, it seemed to belong to Maddie, that whole good vibes thing. And who is wanting good vibes, like just in a general sense, who's really wanting good vibes? Kohberger. I mean, his life is just filled with bad vibes from his own students. He's getting bad vibes from his neighbor's wife as well. There's a story that's just come out about that as well. So the other thing is, as a guy looking at Maddie's Instagram, it to me is quite compelling. I mean, look at especially that image. I have this image rolling constantly in my end credits. It's quite a glamorous picture. A girl in a bikini, kind of on a yacht or a speedboat, and all of these other images as well, right? Personally, as a guy, I find Maddie's Instagram, excluding the very last picture, to be more compelling and flattering than Kaylee's, right? And please don't take that the wrong way. It doesn't mean I like this one more than that one. I'm taking it through the criminal psychology. And I mean, if you really want to have a competition about it, I've got a terrible Instagram. There's virtually no pictures of me. It's not really done in a very curated way at all. So I'm just saying, within the criminal psychology, I have an idea that Maddie's may have been more interesting, but we do have to recognize that it appears that Kohberger's account followed hers. Now, we don't know whether some account mischievously pretended to be Kohberger and followed her. We don't know if that's the case. But yeah, if you look at Maddie's Instagram, other than this last picture, it's, I think, pretty compelling. And if you look at this image on this side over here, she actually went onto Pinterest to really make the effort to associate her with really beautiful ideas in certain senses. And didn't this catch his attention? There you actually have them standing on the balcony. And how often did Maddie stand on that balcony? How often did Kaylee? Because that would be another way that he could see them. So I think when you look at, for example, this image of Maddie, and you look at pictures of Kaylee, I think you've just got to ask, which one do you think caught Kohberger's attention? But equally, wasn't it clear that she was in a relationship? For example, that image over there. So it is a tough one. It's really tough to figure this aspect out. I do want to have a look at the poll. Have you guys voted yet? Let's have a look. So 38% say Kaylee, which is almost twice as many as Maddie. And just as many say, I just don't know. I'm kind of caught in the I just don't know part as well. It's such a close contest in a way. It's a horrible way to put it, but it's so difficult to call that it's very, very hard to say. But it seems like only 24% of you, a quarter, think that it is Maddie. And this is one of those areas where true crime, it's like true crime is often, we've tried to show you how smart we are and how obvious the answers are. Well, here's a case where the answer isn't very obvious. It's a very difficult one to call. Do you guys agree? Both are beautiful. Yeah, both are beautiful. It is a personal opinion. Another real way of interrogating this, and I'm going to say half of what I am thinking because it's the harsh reality of life. If you look at who Kohberger took on that Tinder date, and you compare her to Maddie and Kaylee, I think a lot of guys would say both those girls were totally out of your league, but equally, one of them might be even more out of your league than the other. The other thing that you could say is, but perhaps Kohberger thought that he'd sort of come of age, if you know what I mean. Bear in mind, it lost a lot of weight. I was actually surprised that he appears to be fairly good looking. I really thought he would look shorter and not really. I didn't really think he'd be a good looking guy, and I don't think he's good. I don't think he's bad looking. I think he was really bad looking as a kid and as a young adult. But I think as an older person, he was actually quite good looking. But then, so I think the important thing to sort of ask is, how did he see himself? What was who did he think he deserved? And again, another guy would say, dude, they are totally out of your league. And I think they were out of his league in terms of the social status thing. But on paper, if you didn't know his backstory, you didn't know what a loser he was, You didn't know how effed up he was and all that kind of thing. Just on paper, looking at what he looked like and comparing him to some of the dudes that you did see in the house, in the doorway, in the body cam. I don't know if you would say that he didn't have a hope in hell, but that would sort of depend on him not saying anything, and you're not really getting a sense of how nervous he was and awkward and all that kind of thing. I think the other side is which of these two girls would be more, how can I put it, friendly or open to a soft guy, if I can put it that way, or a sensitive guy. And if you think about it, when you say Kaylee's ex is a lot more like Kohberger than Maddie's boyfriend, I'm just saying, in a general sense, he seems like a quieter, more sensitive guy. And maybe Kohberger was aware of that aspect, that if that's the kind of boyfriend that she had, maybe I have a chance. You know what I mean? That kind of thinking. People say, I can't believe I'm reading people think he's good looking. I'm not saying he's handsome. I'm saying he's not as unattractive as I thought. I mean, Adam Lanza was particularly unattractive. Nicholas Cruz, I don't think he was very good looking either. Right? I don't think Chris Watts is very good looking myself, but a lot of people thought he was. I'm just saying that he was a lot less unattractive than I actually expected. I thought it would be a total, not just a loser, but he looks like a loser. I don't know if he looks like a loser now. He did look like a loser in the past. And I think that may be part of the problem, was that he looked like he'd arrived. The problem is that he still hadn't developed the social skills and other things, right? Liesel, good to see you here. Thanks. Definitely. He would not only look better if he looked more relaxed, but he would also, if he wasn't so nervous, he would. Confidence is attractive. I mean, haven't you seen some people that are not your type in some way, but they are so charming and they are so, I don't know, they've got such a personality that makes them incredibly attractive. You have some comedians that are like that. I've got a cousin who's not a beauty queen, but she's such a awesome personality that you just love her, right? And I must say, I was in love with that cousin for a little while. Yeah, Ethan is handsome, and he's certainly more handsome than Kohberger, right? So that's really the point. He's not ugly. Okay, let's continue. So this is the part that I think is the bottom line here, right? This is the part that I really want to get to. What are the implications of all of this? What are the implications? Now, I'm going to kind of start with a thing that I wanted to sort of end with. Let's see if I can find it. Just give me a second. So this was going to be the video I was going to do today if this news hadn't come out, right? I was going to be working on Bad Teachergate as this huge thing that we've all underestimated. We've all underestimated the importance of Bad Teachergate, right? And the reason why I wanted to emphasize this was because I was thinking, I can't think of any reason why this has really happened. Like, I'm trying to think of the triggering thing. I can't really think of anything. And so what what could that thing be that triggered it? And then I thought, surely bad Teachergate was a massive trigger. And so the question is, isn't that the actual trigger then, right? But that was before this information came out. And so what this information does, this whole idea of that he DM'd over and over again and got no response, what that actually does is it puts bad Teachergate into a kind of perspective. It basically says, yeah, probably bad Teachergate was a factor, but it's possibly not the number one factor. And by the same reckoning, not getting a response to how are you may also not be the number one factor. In other words, it's kind of a muddle of several factors. I don't, so you say, was there one single trigger or were there a bunch of triggers, right? And that's where we sort of deal with some of the implications, is that this brings us a real sense that there were connections, not very specific, not very real connections for most of us. I don't know how many of you have asked someone, how are you, whatever, engaged online, and then you don't get a response. It's not the end of the world. It happens all the time. But I think that's totally different doing that, and you can see them every day. Thanks, Paul. Do you know what I mean? Totally different if you are saying, hey, how are you? And then later you go and drive around and see that person reading a book, and why are they not responding? Let me give you a very silly example of that. When I was covering the Oscar Pistorius case, I really wanted to reach out to one of the family members of the victim of Reeva Steenkamp. And so there was something I wanted to ask her. So I literally texted, I can't remember if it was an Instagram message or what, but I literally sent a message to this relative. And the moment I sent it off, the TV in court went on to this relative, and then she looked at her phone. And then you got this weird sense of, wow, that's my message kind of thing. And then, of course, I actually can't remember if she responded. I think she actually did. But you can imagine when you see that, when you can see the person and you know they're not responding and you know what they're doing, it's so much more personal, right? Okay. So let's deal with the implications as I've scripted them. So the first thing I want to say is this isn't just a case of a creep who messaged someone and they didn't reply, and then that set him into a murderous rage, right? The important thing to sort of emphasize is that it's so hard to get all my information in one place. Let me just come back to that. Just give me a second. Have I got it here? No, it's not that one. I'm trying to find the one from Fox News. I thought I had it. Fox 6. So I want to show you the article from Fox where Nancy Grace talks about what his father said to the neighbor, just to illustrate how lonely he was. Is it this one? So I thought I had this information on hand. No, it's not. It's not this one. Oh, there we go. Okay. So Aunt Denny says maybe his dad was his linchpin. Once he left home, he succumbed to without his dad to ground him. I do think the reason he's so close to dad is because he's not becoming he hasn't individuated himself. He's still like a son. He's still like, he's not become his own man yet, right? I get a little bit of a sense of that. So if we look at this article, this is from Fox News, right? Brian's Kohberger had that conversation. We know about that, but Nancy Grace apparently went to Moscow, Idaho. We've seen some pictures of that, but she spoke to the neighbor, and apparently, where is it? Over here. She said on Fox and Friends that Kohberger's father, while helping him move into the apartment, asked if the neighbor would be friends with his son. That seems to be a acknowledgement that he's been alone his whole life. He's had a problem. Is kind of had a problem fitting in socially all his life. The fact that his father would actually intervene like that, right? And then this is what Nancy Grace says. It's like setting up a play date. And at some point, the neighbor's wife said, "Don't bring Kohberger back. I've got a bad feeling. Do not bring him back into this apartment," right? Now, think about that as the text to whatever played out in October, where he's texting, "Hey, how are you?" And also, in other words, he's reaching out, he's trying to, and we know he reached out to his neighbor, he's trying to just socialize, he's trying to just be with other people. And so bear in mind, in the academic setting, he goes to class, he does his job, he does what he needs to do, he's studying whatever, and then he goes home, and then he's kind of all alone. It's sort of this very contrasting situation where, if you look at the image behind me, it's this very contrasting situation where he goes into this cauldron, this amphitheater of faces, young faces, and beautiful people, and happy people, right? He enters that cauldron, and then he leaves it, and then he's all alone, and then he spends the whole night sort of by himself, right? And then the same thing again. He goes to class, and all these faces are there, and he's kind of older than everyone else to some extent. And then back, same thing. Then he's alone again. And he's trying to kind of have the same experience everyone else is having. He wants to go to parties. He wants to have a girlfriend. He wants to hang out with friends. He wants to drink with people. He wants to go and watch the game. But for whatever reason, he's just not able to do that. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle. And I've experienced this as someone who's traveled around the world and been also alone for fragments of time. Like right now, I'm single as well. When you're single, it's almost like there's a reason you're single, and so girls stay away. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. It's almost like, so if you're married, you're safe, and people can kind of flirt with you. In other words, it's kind of a vicious cycle. It's like if you are single, then, well, there's a reason, and so guys steer clear. And so that, in other words, then it perpetuates itself. Whereas if you're not single, well, then it's almost like, well, you can actually flirt with that person because somebody else likes them. That's kind of an endorsement, right? You know what I mean? And so him being single becomes like a badge of dishonor, not just being single, but also being friendless. And so it becomes like, well, I think he's a creep. I'm worried about him. And then that isolation gets even worse. The flip side to it is, if you think, what if the neighbor did invite him in? What if the neighbor who had kids downstairs that sort of didn't talk to him and hoped that she'd accept her kids crying, what if she did go up to him and said whatever, and they actually had they formed some sort of platonic relationship? What if the person that he reached out to in the DM said hi, and he said, "Hi, I'm Brian, blah blah blah," and she said, "You seem like a really nice guy, but I must tell you, I'm in a very serious relationship or whatever it is. And I've had that experience where I reached out to someone online, and that's exactly what they said. I just want to let you know I'm in a relationship that means a heck of a lot to me, and that is an important thing to do and to say. It's not so good if you just ignore that person because it just feels like you're nothing, right? So the problem is, as soon as you engage with a creep, they may take that as this huge compliment and then use that as a reason to continue to engage. But the other side is, if you do simply explain in a rational way, hi, this is the situation, and then the person either responds, I understand, and then if they continue, then you block them. But you have at least been civil in that sense, right? I'm just saying, if something like that had happened, if there was some glue connecting Brian to someone else in his community, where it formed a friendship, where he was hanging out, could that have changed what had happened here? Because this crime seems like an attack on the community. This crime seems like hatred to others. So if just someone had reached out to him, if I can indulge a little bit, I take my dog for a walk very often, and there's one dog walk I really like. I'm very attracted to, but she's made it very clear that it's not mutual. But she's nevertheless quite friendly. It's sort of like, look, I know what you want or whatever, and I know what you are feeling. And I'm not going to treat you like the plague. Let's have a sense of humor about it, and we can hang out here and there, but you know what I mean. And in other words, so it's not like this toxic, unpleasant thing that's sort of happening. It's like there's actually a little bit of a sense of humor about it, and you know what I'm saying. And couldn't that have been the case with Brian? And if it was, couldn't that have changed the outcome here? Yeah, she did set boundaries. Okay. So what I'm trying to say here is all of this happened with not just within a scenario of someone came from Pennsylvania and started stalking someone at this house. It's not like that. It's someone who came from there, made this real effort to try and make friends and connect with people, and he failed. And this crime, in a way, is the result of that failure. Someone who was lonely to begin with became even lonely. And what is a lonelier place? And a place where you're surrounded by what you see behind me, laughing, happy kids who are having the time of their life, and that exposes you, your misery, your social death, your insufficiency, your impotency. It just makes a mockery of your life. Jeepers, is this the life I'm leading? I'm completely alone, and do I really deserve it? Am I such a horrible person? And then it turns out that he is, but it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. What did Girl Interrupted say? I'm also single. Okay. So and then that brings us to coveting.
No, he covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day. No, he covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day. No, he covets.
Okay, I want to stop that. Okay. So you could argue, if you're not familiar with this channel and you don't know me, you might say, yeah, but you could say that of any case, that any criminal or every criminal covets. And the answer is no, that's not true. And what I mean is, in the sense of the true biblical sense of coveting, where you see somebody else and you are constantly coveting, and the essential thing to acknowledge here is that it looks like he kills who he covets, right? if you compare this to the situation in the Chris Watts case and Scott Peterson, he doesn't kill who he covets. He kills for the person he covets in that case. So in the Chris Watts case, he doesn't kill Nicole Kessinger. He covets his relationship with her. He kills the threat to what he covets. Do you see that? In the Scott Peterson case, he doesn't kill Amber Frey. He covets Amber Frey. He kills instead the person that he sees as a threat to that. In this case, you're seeing real coveting. I mean, Chris Watts and Scott Peterson didn't stalk anyone, right? They were having experiences with the person that they wanted to be with, right? You know what I'm saying? In this case, you don't have that. You have stalking. You have a lot of coveting going on, but it's not just that, it's beyond that. There was a lot of coveting as well. When he went on that Tinder date, it's the same thing. He's not just coveting a person, he's coveting the whole experience. He's coveting the whole, if you look at the picture behind me, he's coveting that, laughter, joy, excitement, the whole shared experience of being at university, the whole thing where you are part of a community. That's also what he's coveting. He's coveting the whole party scene and the whole social scene. And how, I mean, almost like the first step to getting into that social theater, he sees it as, well, perhaps you need to have a girlfriend. And through the girlfriend, you have all of these other experiences, right? But the part that I think is so pertinent and such an insight is if you see this person who is primarily motivated and activated and obsessed and focused and fixated by coveting constantly. Why is it happening? Because unlike Scott Peterson, unlike Chris Watts, he's on the outside. He's on the outside not only of a marriage or an affair, he's on the outside of everything. And to make it all worse, while he's on the inside of this huge social media frenzy that is college life, that has got to be really invalidating. Like, you in the middle of all of these people who are obviously and easily and normally having fun, and he's not, and he just doesn't know how to do that. And he's coming from another sort of dispensation, coming from another culture, university culture, and he's not able to adapt to this one. Not only in terms of the kids around him, but his neighbors and also the students that he's teaching. It's a real misfit situation. Are you saying that Sir Anthony Hopkins has got tender eyes? So do you remember another thing that I brought up was that there's what is gratuitous about this whole situation? And so the answer is, on the one side, the crimes are incredibly gratuitous, right? But they are a mirror of the gratuitous other side, the side that he can't get, right? Which is gratuitous sex, gratuitous fun, gratuitous partying, gratuitous, you can say, hedonism, gratuitous socializing. And because it's so gratuitous, it's so much harder to bear the fact that he's not experiencing any of that. And that is the source of this murderous impulse, because it's not just an ordinary level of people having fun or socializing. It's this really extreme level. And it's like, so why can't I be part of this, right? And as a result, the murders represent that. Instead of just killing one person, it's the murders are gratuitous as well. The murders show, and that is why I'm reluctant to take on this whole psychopathic thing. There is a psychopathic aspect to it, but I'm reluctant to say this is someone who had no feelings, who is this heartless, cold. It was just this cold, calculated assassination by someone who's merely trying to show off his intelligence. No, there's also a deep personal aching, this excruciating pain that he was experiencing, almost like stabs to his own heart. And so it was a revenge for being cut out. Sorry, it was a kind of revenge for being cut out of all of that, right? Which is both very personal but also indiscriminate. It's very personal to him, but it's indiscriminate in the sense of all of you are having fun, but I'm not. And so whose fault is that? And he feels it's their fault. He feels it's in a way Ethan's fault. It's in a way Xana's fault as well. Not directly, but as part of this collective, we just aren't letting him in. And I must say, you must be careful with that response, saying, I feel so sorry for him, because what he did doesn't deserve any sympathy. I think it's another thing to say, I can empathize or I can understand his situation. Okay, but you shouldn't empathize or sympathize or have compassion for how he dealt with that situation, because there were tons of other responses he could have had. He could have joined a chess club or something like that. He could have taken active steps to ingratiate himself in. Universities are full of little communities, and he could have tried, I think, harder. In all that time that he was stalking, maybe he could have spent a bit more time doing almost like the character in Fight Club. Go to these, I don't know, not necessarily self-help groups, but these little subgroups, movie clubs and whatever, right? Instead, he goes to the top of the pile. He goes to the house on King Road, and he wants the princess in the tallest tower. Maybe start a bit at a bit more of a modest level. Maybe try and make friends with your neighbor, right? Maybe go and speak to the neighbor whose kids are crying, or whatever it is, right? So can you see there is a bit of an arrogance there, that he wants to start at the top, not work his way up, right? Okay. I got a bit sidetracked just talking about coveting, but can you see what we're dealing with here in terms of these texts or these Instagram messages? Excuse me. It does bear out the theory we had since day one, which is that someone was the odd one out. Someone was watching, looking, and peeping. And it makes sense that if he was actively stalking the neighborhood, that he would do so as well when he wasn't around, that he'd do so online. It makes sense that they sort of hold hands with one another, that he was stalking in situ, and that he was doing this online, right? Makes sense. And now let's deal with what was triggering. And I'm going to just sort of cover what I brought up a moment ago again, about bad Teachergate. Is there anyone here that doesn't know what bad Teachergate means? Is there anyone here, when I say bad Teachergate, you don't know what I'm talking about? If you in chat and you know the answer, you can give the answer. Saves me the So when we talk about bad Teachergate, we're talking about that incident where Brian graded his students very harshly, they thought, or to the standard that he thought for a PhD student, not kind of a sophomore. And it was so bad that the lecturer had him stand up and have half the class, like 75 students, basically criticize him, criticize how he was grading them. And the result of that was that he basically from then did a switcheroo, and then he graded them all like A's or 100% or whatever it was, but basically paid no attention to their papers and no attention to them. He didn't really interact with them. Basically, just went from grading them really strictly. All of them complain, or half of them complain. Then he pays no attention to them and grades them all very well. Bad teacher gate, right? That's what we're referring to. Okay, and so I first thought that that was a huge trigger that sent him down a downward spiral. And part of the way he tried to satiate that was possibly through a relapse, taking drugs. But it's also possible that one of the ways that he felt like, well, I really feel like a nobody. I really feel insulted by this. Maybe one of the ways he felt was a exit out of that downward spiral, like a off ramp, was to get a girlfriend, someone that he liked. If only she liked me, I'd feel a lot less horrible about everything. I just need somebody to love me, or I just need some support or whatever. I just need some of what I'm seeing right in front of me, some hugs, some high fives, some kisses on the cheek, some TLC, whatever, right? And so my impression was that Bad Teacher Gate was like really important to the story, and I think it is, but it fades now. It sort of goes down a couple of notches because we're dealing with this. And obviously, this was a trigger. So let me read what I've written here. Have I got triggering up? So let me ask just a very simple question. Do you think it was triggering sending those DMs? I mean, you can imagine it's kind of a bold step for him. He'd been stalking for a while, and now he at last, so he'd been stalking as early as August 21st. So by the end of October, that's a whole month later, right? The end of October, after stalking and checking out what is going on in person for weeks, now he eventually sends a DM. He's not sitting there stalking, sending a DM. He first stalks and watches and covets for a long time, and then it eventually becomes almost too much for him. And then he says, "Hi, how are you?" No answer. Again, I really want to connect. They seem to be having so much fun. I'd just love to say something to them, whatever. I love to, whatever, right? And so, which one do you think is more triggering? Actually sending those messages and getting no response at the end of October, or Bad Teacher Gate? Or is that question in itself misleading because it's all part of the same triggering process? Yeah, that's right. Thought Criminal says it's triggering. It happened to me. That's right. Gaylor says, do we know he DM'd them? We suspect that he did. So far we've got 2 or 3 mainstream media outlets that have repeated the story. I actually wanted to open this live with Banfield talking about it, but I think they are actually trying to confirm it. And so we don't know for a fact. We've heard that it looks like it's from an investigator familiar with the investigation, but it is very likely not official law enforcement, but maybe someone hired by the family. Terry says, would anyone that did connect with him be safe? Ironically, I think the answer is yes. I suppose you could argue if that person then broke up with them, maybe not. But I think if you think about it within the incel psychology, the solution to all of this shit is he just needs to get laid. Then it's end of the whole murderous campaign. Then just fizzles away. Just that. He just gets laid. Bye bye. It's all over. I think there is sort of that possibility that if someone is particularly cruel and merciless, that may be triggering in itself. But I actually think that's not the case. I think his number one priority is to kind of connect in that sense. So if that happens, I think he would be absolutely fine for a while. If he got laid once and then not again for 5 years, you might have another problem. Thanks a lot, Deborah. That is his. It's like a curse. It's like a burning thing, and that's a really big way that he can feel emasculated within the college setting. I'm 28 years old, and I mean, we don't know if he was a virgin, but I'm 28 years old, and it's not that I can't just make. It's not just that I can't get a girlfriend. I can't actually make any friends. Right? That's his situation. Okay, so let me read through for the third time. I just want to read through this section of the script. Triggering. Okay. So I have to say, after initially believing there was a very visceral connection, right? If we go back to the very beginning of this case, I'm sure you felt the same way. We thought there was a very visceral connection, like a long-term relationship, something that was even going to lead to marriage, something that went back into childhood. And it turns out there was a long-term relationship, but in terms of his childhood and in terms of his background. But it felt like there was a very visceral connection when we didn't know these people from the outside superficially. And that suddenly turned sour, right? And then after that, it seemed that there was no connection, right? So we went from there was this very visceral connection to one of the victims to, well, there's no connection whatsoever. But the reality seems to be in a fuzzy gray area somewhere in between. And I think the fuzzy gray area in between is slightly on the side of there being no connection. Because I kind of get the idea, did they actually ever meet in person? And maybe they did at the restaurant, but it certainly wasn't in a way that, I mean, if Kaylee did have a stalker and the stalker was Brian, Kaylee didn't say, Mom, there's this guy called Brian. She never said that. So you don't like get the idea that it was very direct. You kind of get the idea that it was very in the background, right? So there is a connection, but it's not nearly as connected as we would have imagined, which is why I think it made this case quite a challenge for us and for law enforcement, because it just wasn't that obvious. Kohberger may have perceived not getting an answer or an acknowledgement, not as merely rejection, but a trigger for all the other brushes off and rejections. You know, that sense of, what is wrong with me? Like, don't I actually deserve even an answer? What does Archer Girl say? Archer Girl says, if one of those girls would have talked to him, he would have probably become a possessive stalker anyways. Yes and no. I think it depends. In a way, I agree with you that can only make things worse. But like I mentioned, I don't know if this is a good example, but in terms of my dog walking, I met someone who did talk to me, and we've got quite a good friendship. So it depends on how it's handled. It depends on how it's handled. If she simultaneously allowed him into her, how can I put it, her community or her circle, then to some extent her circle could have also protected her, and at the same time, that would have had a protective effect on these sharp-edged impulses that he was feeling. It would have sort of blunted them, right? I mean, you could basically say, would it have been the end of the world if Brian was invited to one of these parties? And it's a very interesting question. Was he, or did he actually arrive unannounced? We still don't know that. It's possible. I think he did follow them from a distance. But do you see how it's kind of a bind? It's almost like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you do invite him in, well, then you are exposing yourself, possibly making yourself vulnerable. If you don't, then you are sort of worsening those driving forces anyway. You're sort of exacerbating his loneliness. You know, sort of like go and sort yourself out with somebody else. But that's what everybody says. Someone says no trigger makes you kill 4. Yes and no. I think it's not just one trigger. There's a whole backstory of grief and struggle and this pride swallowing siege that was his attempt just to connect with other people. So I don't think it's not that he just snapped because of one thing. I agree with that. And I don't think any crimes that we've really dealt with, Chris Watts, Scott Peterson, I don't think any of those are just snapped crimes. A premeditated crime is also not a he just snapped crime. So yeah, Kohberger may perceive not getting an answer from all of those DMs as not just rejection, but it made him remember all the other rejections. It made him think about that Tinder date that also just ignored him. And what made this worse was that he could actually see one of them, see and hear what they were doing, who they were associating with. No, so it's like, I'm not going to talk to you, but I'll talk to him. I'm not going to talk to you, but we're having a party the next day. So he knows this, that while knowing all the while he's just not worth a damn just to respond to. So that is how he takes it. And I do think what this whole case is starting to address the issue on. Think about this. Don't you agree with this, that this entire case has kind of brought us to the point now where you say, how should a person, male or female, but especially a young female, how should you deal with someone who you think is a stalker? How should you deal with it? How should you deal with unsolicited DMs? It's a worldwide problem. It's a worldwide thing. How do you deal with that? How should you deal with it? And I think there's some uncertainty around that. I think the number one answer, and I think we should deal with it on this channel, I think the number one answer is, number one, tell someone about it. Another thing that you can do is take a screen grab and send it to somebody, your parents or a friend. And you could even have that friend contact the person who's doing that. So it comes by another person. We can see what you're doing, because something that is exposed to the light then goes away, right? Darkness like that when exposed to the light. Another thing that you could do, but you've got to be careful with emasculation, but you could potentially tell a guy or someone that's kind of in a protective position, a guy or the person's boss, you know what, this is happening and it's making me uncomfortable. I think you've also got to ask the question, is the answer to do nothing? Is the answer to try and ignore it and hope it goes away? but I think this does really bring it front and center. I mean, social media is now part of our lives. Certainly wasn't part of some of our lives when we were at university. And so the question is, how do we deal with these issues? What is the gold standard? And so I think that should be the ambit of this channel to deal with that. I mean, I know there's some patrons and mods and supporters here who have got young kids that are growing up, that are going to be in those exact same situations. This is a good chance to ask the question, how do you deal with that? And I think part of the answer is also think about what you're putting out there on your social media, right? Think about how attractive the world, and I think about it like on the one hand, you want people as a student, you want people to think you're cool, you want people to think you're sexy, and it's great that a lot of people do, but some fraction of the people you like are the flies that you don't want to be there. And so maybe you want to moderate your Instagram. I mean, if you look at my Instagram, I'm quite careful about my privacy for other reasons, not to do with what was going on in their situation. But you need to be. I mean, they're showing in a way where they live and their room and the inside of their home. And so the perpetrator here could literally look at their Instagram and see, oh, so that's what the inside of the house looks like, and kind of map it out based on seeing their public posts. So, I mean, that is another area. Be careful showing where you live in a very obvious way. And so easy to be transparent about that. You see creators and people doing a walkthrough of their homes. That's all very nice for the people who like you. But what happens when someone comes along that feels like they don't like you? You've just given them the inside track into your personal space. I'm just saying, in a general sense, what you put onto social media, just in terms of security and privacy, be careful. It's a little bit different showing your face and showing your body and look how attractive I am, but showing your face and your body within the context of your home in an obvious way can be quite dangerous. Okay. So what probably made it worse for him was that she didn't block him. And I understand that actually sounds like a contradiction. And this is what I mean. If this guy's desperate to make contact, he's seeing her, he's really getting this idea of this really pretty girl, right? And I don't know if it was Maddie, but let's imagine it was Maddie. What makes it so much worse is we don't actually know whether any of the victims were doing anything on OnlyFans. That's another question that has come up. But let's assume that they weren't. So what probably made it worse is he sends "How are you" messages, but he doesn't actually get blocked. And so by doing this, because this happened, maybe actually held on to a little bit of hope. Well, she hasn't blocked me, so maybe I do have a chance. Maybe she's keeping the door open, right? Stephanie says, I don't post pictures when I'm on vacation until I'm home. I try to do the same thing. If I am on vacation, I post a picture or whatever when I'm like, some time has gone since I was actually there. Okay. Someone says, I don't even think she saw it. I don't know if I agree with that. I think, look, I get literally hundreds of messages a day, if not thousands. And I certainly don't see all of them on YouTube, but in terms of Patreon, dozens and dozens of messages I get, I read probably 90% of them. And certainly all my Instagram, on Instagram, I read all my messages that I get daily. Then about you, I would imagine that she would have read all of them. So in a way, not blocking him may have actually made it worse, that he thought, is she thinking about it? Is there some hope? When am I going to get an answer? And that then brings us to another insight, something that another word that we can add to what we know about this person, besides that he was quick to anger, that he seemed to be quite impatient, that he seemed obsessive compulsive. We can add now another word to our growing appreciation of this person's identity, and that word is persistent. The Instagram aspect fleshes out a side to the suspect that we've suspected was there all along, an obsessive compulsive fixated kind of personality. We add to that this idea of persistence, and think about that word in relation to this crime, because he doesn't only commit one crime, he persists. He commits 2, 3, 4, and maybe he would have even continued after that. Let me say that again. He doesn't only commit one crime, like the person who didn't answer his DM. He doesn't only commit one crime, he kills the person next to her. Then he goes downstairs and he kills somebody else. Even though there's a guy in that room, he kills somebody else. Even though a dog is barking and someone is actually walking around and the house is creaking and it's not ideal, and there's a DoorDash guy, and his maid actually ends up, it's the 4th trip to the house that night. He persists. It's not ideal, but he persists. Not only does he commit the crime, he persists online after the crime. Just as he persisted online before the crime, he persists online after the crime, contacting and interacting with various channels. I'm not saying that as a fact. I'm just saying that as I think it's very likely. There does seem to be some evidence of that. Do you agree? It also seems like things were coming to a head in the suspect's heart in terms of his feelings of insufficiency just 2 weeks prior to the murders. So I found it very interesting that this happened at the end of October. Imagine if it had happened in June, right? What would that tell you? The idea you kind of get is that he was in Washington, being a student, doing his thing, and with nothing to show for it. He wasn't going to any football games. He wasn't meeting anyone at a bar or whatever. And so he had nothing to show for it. So as time's going by, as the semester's drawing to a close, I think he's starting to think in the same way that you grade, you study and then you grade it on that. I think in a weird way that psychology is there as well. I've been at college for so long now. Well, what do I have to show for it? What's my grade in terms of having fun? What have I achieved, right? Do you know what I'm saying? And so he's now recognizing that he's approaching the end of his semester, and it's like, what have I achieved? And he wants to achieve something. And so he starts to ratchet up the pressure. Welcome, Cold Girl 1. Starts to ratchet up the pressure, right? And even that doesn't lead to anything positive. Hi, how are you? No answer. Again, no answer. And so he comes to the end of this period socially bankrupt, whereas they come to the end of this period, the party's only getting more frenetic. I mean, the party that night, the night of the murders, but also the previous night, Friday the 11th, I would wonder where he was when that took place as well. Like, wasn't he stalking then as well? But anyway, the issue is, as their lives are really taking off, they're about to go on to their happily ever afters. His life is getting more and more clearly invalidated. And do you see what I'm saying? In the same way that his life is on a downward spiral, theirs is on an upward spiral. And he's trying to almost connect to that spiral. He's trying to be part of that. And the fact that he's not part of that perpetuates his downward spiral. It's kind of like this. This is, these are the victims, and this is him. And it's like that, right? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, but there is a big party after the football game, right? Not at the house, but everywhere else. The party was at Corner Club and the frat parties that were going on, right? It was one of the last times that they had to celebrate being who they were, and it was also the last home game of that whole season. So that was really the peak, the zenith of that whole process. And so as the red carpet is sort of rolled out to that end game, he realizes, I haven't really met anyone. Everyone has actually rejected me. But he starts walking onto that carpet, that red carpet of criminal psychology. It appears end of October, where he basically says, look, I've got to do something extreme now. I've got to make contact. I've got to reach out. And he starts that process, crossing that line, trying to make contact with these strangers, essentially, end of October. And for 2 weeks, nothing happens, except that around him, everyone else is still having fun. Thanks, Inez. T Renee says, I want to know if Brian was on Twitch. Okay. That's right. So towards the second half of the semester, he wants to be able to take something home. Do you agree with that? He's come to the second, remember, he had only just come to Washington State in June. And what has happened in terms of his friendships and relationships in July, August, September, and by October, it's like still nothing. And now he really starts pushing that, starts to try to get a result, and then he doesn't. And so it's towards the second half of the semester that he wants to be able to take something home, something out of his experience at Washington State University, besides the academic stuff. So what we may be dealing with here in terms of motive is something specific, right? Rage born out of rejection, but also something specific that triggered a general malaise from his past, a general trauma of being kicked to the curb, of being lonely and being humiliated by girls, even in high school. So when he's sitting there stalking and seeing all these girls having fun, doesn't that remind him of the girls he liked in high school that were also just too good for him and unavailable to him? So bad Teachergate, I think, may have been a significant reason that made him feel a lot more vulnerable than he otherwise would. Do you agree with that? That he didn't just come into Washington prep for murder, that things actually devolved, things actually worsened in certain ways. And one of them was bad Teachergate. That is something you can imagine would really affect a sensitive person. And we saw radical behavior changes from Brian after bad Teachergate. So I think that was a significant reason that made him feel vulnerable. I mean, you can feel how his own students felt that he wasn't very popular. His own students were annoyed by him, and maybe that sense of not being popular sort of fed into other people, where they also thought, well, he's actually a jerk. And then he had to go right out of, just consider this, he had to go right out of the community that he was in, that he'd contaminated with his bad reputation, to another college where they didn't really know about him. Doesn't that make sense? Then you get the sense that it so ruined his reputation within 3, 4, 5 months, right? And what I mean by that is how he perceives it. Okay, well, the horse has bolted. I've ruined things back home in terms of at my apartment and so on. Everybody hates me and no one wants to hang out with me. Well, isn't the next port of call then I'll go to Idaho and see if I can find a friendly interaction there, right? They don't know me there, and so why wouldn't they? So I think bad Teachergate that incident may have led him into the neighborhood in the first place for a little drug soothing. You can imagine that he must have felt incredibly angry and hurt and frustrated and wounded after bad Teachergate. And so maybe he went to the neighborhood. He heard that that is where you can get drugs, right? Not at the house, but in that neighborhood. And that is where he went for some soothing of those ruffled feelings. And that is actually how he came into that neighborhood, but within the perspective of being very badly hurt somewhere else. And also the pattern of behavior, well, when I'm hurt, when I'm not feeling so good, I use drugs to feel better about it. And so that led to a relapse. And we don't know to what extent that is true. We don't know whether the relapse and the stalking go hand in hand. If it did, it would actually make sense. In other words, the relapse makes the stalking worse. The stalking makes the relapse worse as well. And so within that relapse, the house, the girls, one girl in particular got onto his radar. And when he wanted some connection there, so in a way, he's just trying to get away from the pain and whatever in Washington, only to run slap bang into the same thing all over again in Idaho. Because what happens is he tries to get connection and interaction, and it's only 10 times worse because he sees them having so much fun, hears the laughter, hears the shrieks, maybe even sees other things through the windows. And especially seeing this, given the state of his persistent social death, it's particularly painful. It's unbearable for him. And isn't that why this triggered him so much? I mean, isn't this the direct opposite to exactly what he's going through? One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day. Well, he's one really unlucky guy. Isn't that how he's feeling? To not be surrounded by anyone every single day. I mean, it's literally the exact opposite. The sentiment he's feeling and experiencing is literally the exact opposite of this. So you can imagine if he's experienced social death on both campuses, he must feel his goose is cooked. Do you know what I mean? If his social death at Washington State University is basically, it feels like it's impenetrable, there's nothing he can do. And then he goes to Idaho only to have the same end result. He may have felt, well, I totally am outside of this. I hate everyone. Everyone hates me, so I hate them as well. And so I'm not going to commit this crime as payback for what you've done to me, and now you're going to feel what it feels like to be afraid and alone and vulnerable and uncertain, and have your happily ever after taken away from you, and not have a fairy tale. You're going to experience that, not just his victims, but even all the people around them, because their fairy tale ending for the semester gets torn to pieces. The sort of rainbow fairy tale pot of gold at the end of their student career gets taken away. They've got to sort of write exams remotely, and even coming back is a scary prospect. So do you guys agree that where we are now, we're getting a much richer, deeper, connected sense to the entire fabric of this case? Every step that we take, we're getting a much clearer idea of sort of pixelating into view all of those mysterious dynamics that in the beginning we literally had no idea what we were dealing with. It's actually starting to become quite concrete. It's starting to crystallize. That's it. That's right. Okay. And yeah, that's basically what I've prepared for you guys. As I say, from being completely fast asleep, sort of fuzzily reaching for my phone, and then seeing the story, and then having to go from zero to analysis in super quick time. So I hope it's at least been fairly coherent from my side. It does seem that way. EKC, and I do think that is something I want to deal with going forward, is how do you deal with this sort of threat online? Thanks, Yvonne. Josie says it is taking shape, and thank you. Interesting name there. Okay, I'm going to take a few questions. Before I do, I want to touch on something that I think is quite interesting, important, and you might even say quite amusing. Thanks a lot, Les. Thank you. Let's just take a sip of coffee here. So if you've got a notebook, and you can order one of these online, TCRS notebook on Amazon. If you need the link, just ask me in the comments, and I'll put the link to it. But if you've got a notebook like this, I've made a list of the biggest con jobs by social media thus far. And so if you've got a notebook, take out your pens and write down the list that I'm going to give you. If you're not going to be able to, I don't think you're going to be able to keep it in your heads. If you can, well done, you're really clever. There, Sharon Tux provided that link. Okay, so before I before I give you the 5, see if you can come up with any of them. What are the 5 biggest con jobs by social media thus far in terms of this case? Right? And try and put them in the order of severity if you can. Lisa, if you look at Sharon has put the link up in chat a little bit earlier. Sharon, can you maybe post that link again? It's that link over there. Thanks, Sharon. I think so too. I think that is what we are heading towards. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you. He's been framed. Okay. So I guess that's con job number, the last one. Okay, so sorry, where's that? Can you repeat that? Suggesting as a serial killer. Okay, so what we want to do now is put up a list of 5 of the biggest con jobs by social media thus far in terms of this case. Lisa, welcome. Okay, so I would have as number 1. So if you've got a notebook, you should really write this down. Number 1 is the Scream, right? It even made like mainstream media news. You even had, in a way, one creator turning on another creator, like going on to the news and saying, "This is what we found," or whatever. And I think that was actually perfectly justified. Nisi says, lurking in the background, going to go back and listen after. Great analysis. Thanks a lot, Nisi. I'm going to bring Timmy out in a moment. He's sitting on my toes. I wouldn't include the food truck and the whole ex-boyfriend thing. I don't think people were trying to manufacture that. I think people thought those were legitimate lines of inquiry, right? So I don't think that was like deliberately trying to mislead. Although I think there's a point where it got very reckless. Okay. So if you've got a pen and paper, you can start writing these down, 1 to 5. So the first one is the Scream. Let me put it down here so you can see it. SM Kovalinsky says, number 1, the serial killer. To me, that's not as egregious as something like manufacturing a Scream, like getting it and converting the audio and converting a story on the Daily Mail and all of that. That's not as egregious. The serial killer thing has at least a little bit of substance to it. So for me, the number 1, this is in order of worst to least worst, is the Scream. So again, what I'm talking about is a deliberate con job, a deliberate effort to deceive us, right? So I would say the number 1 worst con job thus far in terms of this case from social media was the Scream. I would have number 2 is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just trying to think what I mean when I wrote this. What did I mean by saying the false accusation? I don't actually even know what that means. What do you think that means? I've got it on my notes, but I don't know what it means. Where was there a false accusation? Oh, that's right. Thanks a lot. I just had a total blank there. So yeah, that's the second most egregious con job was someone, I think, on TikTok who was literally accusing a professor of committing the crime and having an affair, right? I would put that as the second worst con job. And what was even more crazy about it was even though she was served a cease and desist, she continued almost like, I believe this so strongly that I'm going to just keep doing it. And maybe the cease and desist is just part of the whole conspiracy, right? Thanks so much for that, Elizabeth. You saved me there. So number one, the scream. Number two, the false accusation against the professor. What would you say is the third one that is, and this one's going to be controversial. Some of you will say, no, but I believe that that was true. The third one, what do you think the third one is? Thanks, Elizabeth. That I have, that is the third one, the Ring audio. Remember the audio came out and they said this is the actual audio of people screaming on the inside or whatever. Do you think that that was legitimate? Thanks a lot, Lisa. Gloria, we don't like to refer to other channels by name unless we're complimenting them. So let's not do that. Yeah, someone said that the Ring doorbell camera captured this audio and that social media got the exclusive on that. And you've never heard any of that on mainstream media. You must remember, if mainstream media refer to something, sometimes they're late, like the Tapper Talk stuff. It took them a while to feel that that was credible. But if mainstream media don't touch it, it's because they have tried to vet it and they have been unable to vet it. And so you must always be, it's not 100% like that. Sometimes mainstream media don't pay that much attention, or they don't really care, or they just don't know. But more often than not, if they don't touch something that is this huge scoop on social media, you've got to be very careful about it. And I know a lot of people will say, no, social media knows better than the mainstream media. Yeah. Okay. Someone says the smiling mugshot that was photoshopped. Quite interesting. Let me actually add that. So where were we? We were at number 3. Is there anyone here that feels that the Ring doorbell audio is actually genuine, that you believe it, that you think is real evidence? Is anyone here that thinks, you know what, I actually think it's true? You can't really say that I think it's genuine, but I didn't hear. Oh, I see what you're saying. I think it's genuine. I think that there is a recording, but I don't think the recording we heard is that recording. That's my point. So, Robin, if you have any way of contacting me with any more details surrounding that, please do. You can contact me on Instagram. Sharon, can you put a link to my Instagram there? If you can put either me into contact with that security guard, or just either get a recording of what they say or a little written statement of what they say. If they want to stay anonymous, that's cool. But it's always good to get first-hand accounts. So if you can send that to my Instagram, I'd appreciate that. Okay, so far, I don't think any of you think that that's real. Okay. There's my Instagram. Okay, so here's the fourth one. The jailhouse snitch. That was one of the biggest con jobs so far on this case. Do you guys know what that was about? It was that whole story that Brian was exposing himself and kind of, what's the word? He was ranting and raving, and he was singing song lyrics from can't even remember the musician now, and I totally fell for that. It was late at night. I've got to say I fell for it for 5 minutes though. I mean, and also the Daily Beast fell for it, and quite a few others as well. So I think Insider as well. So the Jailhouse Snitch was another con job, and there's a difference between I see a con job on the mainstream media, and I repeat that. That doesn't mean I've done a con job. If I put that up and someone said it's not real, or there's reason to believe to suspect it's not real, and I just ignore that, then that becomes a con job from my side. What I mean is, it was a con job that the Daily Mail fell for, and then so did quite a lot of other people. And you could even argue that it wasn't actually a con job, that the person who gave this information may just have been misled. You might say it's an accidental con job, but it's nevertheless not an accurate story. But that's why it's number 4. If any of that information was true, it would have amounted to a confession, because at some point it was stated that Brian had said, I cut them, I'll cut you, or something like that. You must be afraid of me, or something like that. And so that would have amounted to a confession, which would have had huge legal consequences. Good night, SM. Thanks a lot for being here. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot for your help as well. I'm not that anti the Daily Mail. I really respect the Daily Mail's coverage of the Amanda Knox case, for example. They find a lot of photographs and stuff. I'm not saying it's all good news or credible, but they find a heck of a lot of information that nobody else does, and they get it first. So I find them very useful, but also not 100% trustworthy, but pretty trustworthy anyway. SM Kovalinsky, take care. Sleep well. I don't see that as a con job, Deborah. Like, I think seeing someone just before they died makes them, to some extent, someone you want to look at. That's true in any true crime case. I don't think it's being mischievous or reckless or wrong to do that. You just got to temper your speculation, especially when law enforcement say, guys, these aren't the suspects. And we know law enforcement did that. And as soon as they did that, I was like, okay, a message received. But there were other channels that didn't do that. Also, the last person you text on your phone is also someone you want to, and the kinds of text, there's some media refer to it as frantic text. That's not a deliberate con job, although with some channels I think it did become that. Thanks, Obsessed, for Disneyland. Thanks for that. Okay, so that brings us to the 5th one, and this one has come up sort of in the last couple of days, I think. And some of you may disagree with this one, because I suppose you could argue that it could be true. Especially if you take the fact, and it is a fact, that Brian apparently said when he was arrested, was anyone else arrested, right? So there is some meat and potatoes to the Daily Fail. I am aware of that, but I must say, as a journalist, I'm someone who worked in the media. I find I'm often looking at the Daily Mail, especially in this case as well. But the Amanda Knox case, and also the Madeleine McCann case, and the Daily Mail has actually covered me as well. I don't know if that's a compliment, but me and Lisa Wilson, in terms of our coverage of the John Benet Ramsey case. So I don't know. I think they are useful. I think their coverage is useful. So, are there any of you disagree that the accomplice theory is not a con job, that it's actually a valid idea or issue? As soon as you take the accomplice theory, you know what that means. You start saying, let's not look at Brian, let's look at everybody that we've seen in these documentaries. Who is Phoebe talking about? Who is Martha talking about? Who is, can't remember the Vietnamese girl, is it Layla or Kayla? I think Kayla. Who's Kayla talking about? Or could they be suspects? And so you have this endless content on, could this person be an accomplice, or could that neighbor be an accomplice? And all it really amounts to is witch hunting. Let's focus our attention on who law enforcement are focusing their attention on. The other thing is, if you acknowledge what we've said in this episode and all the other coverage, that you're dealing with a loner, you're dealing with a misfit, you're dealing with someone who did this because he was so lonely, well, then where does the accomplice fit into that? I mean, if he does it because he can't make any friends, well, to have an accomplice, that's a really close friend that is going to go into something as bigger of an investment and a commitment as murder. That person must have a very deep connection to you. And I mean, it's a botched crime as well. And did Dee see anybody else? No, she saw one person leaving the crime scene. So, yeah, I also think it's a con job. So that's the number 5 one. I actually thought there were only 5, but now there's a 6th one, which I agree with as well, is the smiling mugshot. I must say, I was incensed when I saw that. I thought, this is true crime at its worst. It's the moment of truth where Brian comes into custody, and we want to get to know the real Brian, and now you alter that to make the real Brian look like he's got duping delight or whatever, and then you have some content about that. And bear in mind, they just issued a gag order, and we didn't really know much at that point, just that he'd been arrested. Well, now you've got instant content. Look at Brian smiling there. Oh, is he smiling? Is this Photoshopped? Ha ha ha. It's the perfectly wrong time to be doing that, right? Now is where you get serious and you say, who are we dealing with here? Who is this person really? What really happened in this case? And who is he? What is his identity? And the last thing that he is the smiling person. He didn't do it because he was happy, right? He wasn't happy when he was taken into custody. In fact, his lawyer said that he was shocked. And I do want to cover his lawyer's response to this. So now what I want you to do, can I quickly ask you, how many of you have actually written down those 6 con jobs? How many? Let's just get a show of hands. How many of you have done that? Again, that's not a deliberate con job. I don't think the coroner knew that they were all in their bedrooms. I have actually heard something about Ethan being in the hallway. That's actually a con job as well. But these are the biggest con jobs. There's actually been a lot of little con jobs all over the place. So Dover says, I missed that assignment. I was on the phone. So let me give it to you very quickly. What are the 6 biggest con jobs by social media thus far? Number 1, the scream. Number 2, the false accusation that the female professor had an affair with someone. Number 3, the Ring audio. That there is Ring audio, but this was purporting to be the actual Ring audio. Number 4, the jailhouse snitch, the one who said that Brian had exposed himself. Number 5, excuse me, the accomplice theory, which is playing out right now, I believe. And then number 6, the smiling mugshot. You could also add to that, but it's just social media doing its thing. All of the Elantra garbage, like there's an Elantra, a Kia and Elantra, exactly the same thing. All of those things, this sighting. One thing that I thought was a con job that I don't think turned out to be was the vehicle moving in the background of the one reporter. I thought, cheapers, that is so ridiculous and unlikely, and it did turn out to be, just showed you, it really revealed how transparent and accessible and vulnerable that house was just to cars driving by. So as I was trying to really debunk that, I actually realized, wow, this house is really vulnerable to people driving by. Yeah, but the point is, it wasn't a real smile. It was a faked mugshot. It's just not really good. Okay, so for all of those who've made that list, I want you to keep that list somewhere. And what I want you to do is, in future, you can do that after this live. You can do it. You can let me know in the comments. You can also, Timmy, I'm going to pick you up. Come. You're going to go for a walk. I think I might actually take him for a walk right after this. So what I want you guys to do is take your pause and put a pen in your paw and tick off on these lists that you've got. Go through these, go through the channels that you watch regularly. And what I want you to do is evaluate which of these channels have what's the word? Supported, reported, how can I put it? Which of these channels have participated, I think is the best word, in this sort of mischief, in these con jobs, and give them a rating out of 6. So 6 out of 6 is bad. In other words, that you may be dealing with a con job channel, and 0 out of 6 is very good. So in other words, if the channel said that there was a scream, right? In other words, someone said that wow, we've got a recording of the scream, and then another channel quickly jumped onto that and said, hey, we've got a recording of a scream, then that's a tick against that channel. If I don't think there were too many channels who did this, but if there's anyone who said, wow, it looks like there's a professor that's a suspect here, a female professor had an affair, but presented that as legitimate, that would be another one, 2 out of the 2. Did the channel present this Ring audio as as breaking news, as wow, we got this exclusive audio of the actual crime, right? That's the third one. I'm definitely a channel that made the error that I really thought the jailhouse snitch was, because the woman went on camera, she gave her name and surname, and it went onto the mainstream media. So you could actually give me a tick there, or half a tick, or whatever. I did immediately say that it was a false thing, as soon as I found out. But that's the fourth one. Are there any channels that have presented that as, even now, that is what he did? The fifth one is the accomplice theory. Are there channels that are pushing that right now? Bear in mind, that's not what law enforcement are saying. Law enforcement aren't looking for an accomplice. Law enforcement aren't looking for tips for an accomplice. They're looking for, what do you call it? Tips in terms of the dynamics and the connections. And then the mugshot thing, which channels put out the whole smiling mugshot thing as, so like I didn't even put that on my YouTube channel at all, even to say that that's not real. I think I mentioned it on, or did I do it on YouTube? If I did, it was to say that this is unacceptable. As far as I remember, I put it on Twitter, just to say that actually, I think it's the other way around. I think I tried to put it on Twitter and that message actually saved as an archive message. And I also thought, if I do this, is it going to declare war kind of thing? And I thought, but anyway, the smiling mugshot were the channels that did that. And so you can use this shortlist so far as a way to grade channels that are con job channels. Are they 1 out of 6, which is better, or are they 6 out of 6, which is through and through a con job channel, an opportunistic channel that's trying to be popular and get money and views at our expense, but they're actually conning you and lying to you and manipulating you, right? You can use these 6 thus far as a way of grading those channels. And we can come up with, in other words, you can put up, let's say, 3, 4, 5 creators and then evaluate them on these scores and then rate them out of 6. And as this case goes by, we can and it will happen, we can extend this list of con jobs. It's not every little con job, because some of it's really silly. It's the biggest con jobs and the most effort going into bullshit, right? It's serious, deceitful con jobs that are going on. It's not like the little things, and sometimes people do speculate in a reasonable way. So at this point, I wouldn't put serial killers on the con job thing, because I think there's some basis to that he did study about serial killers, and of course the crime is not a serial killing, but it is a series of crimes. So I wouldn't say that is manufactured out of thin air. But I do think it may be a month from now, 2 months from now, if the serial killer narrative starts becoming a thing, then that'll be a con job as well, because there's in other words, no human remains are found in Pennsylvania, but the whole serial killer thing sort of comes back, then that'll become a con job as well. But it's a really good way that we can evaluate ourselves, also to what extent were you taken by these con jobs, and also evaluate the true crime community, but especially the creators, and then just see what level are you as a con jobber, right? And make it explicit. And so probably by June, when the case goes to trial, in terms of the biggest con jobs by social media, we may be at 15 or 20 or even more. So I want you guys to help make a list of that if you see it, and we see which creators take their cue from others and are basically in cahoots in terms of conning, and which ones are sort of steer to the straight and narrow. In other words, which creators are truth tellers, true investigators, authentic in this genre, and which ones are brazen opportunists, right? In other words, which are the Sherlock Holmes and which are the wishy-washy wannabes, right? I don't think that's very likely. What I do think you might see is a plea deal or a situation where this case doesn't go to trial. I do think you might see that. Okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes dealing with some of your questions and comments, and then I'm going to take this guy for a walk and myself. Yvonne, I think the answer is that is just the jargon of the affidavit. In the same way you might say, why do they say D and B? In contracts, they will sometimes say, okay, at the beginning, they'll say, well, this entity we'll refer to in future in the rest of the thing as the client, because there's a generalized jargon to affidavits where you don't refer to things in a very familiar way. It's done in quite a sort of objective way, in a way. I don't know if that's the word. It's done in kind of an impersonal way. I don't know if that answers your question. So let's look at some of your questions. Idaho does have the death penalty. Terry says, I can think of 5 con jobs or 5 channels that were participating in con jobs and that I've left because of that. Yeah. And you know what's really important to do is to look at that and then look at, did they also do con jobs on the Kylie Rodney case? Did they also do con jobs on whatever? And then also go and look at their most popular videos, or those most popular videos con jobs. And I must, what's the word? I must acknowledge that I'm a little bit embarrassed that my most popular video is to do with what the housekeeper said about Patsy Ramsey. Because although the housekeeper believed, that's in the Ramsey case, although the housekeeper believed that Patsy killed John Bonet, I don't believe that. And that video was meant to, in terms of the Patreon side of it, was meant to provide quite a lot of interesting information on Patsy, that the housekeeper thought Patsy's handwriting was the ransom note because she'd written a lot of notes to the housekeeper. And also the housekeeper knew a lot about the other dynamics in the house. Burke whittling, what Burke did with his knife, etc., etc. So the housekeeper is a really important piece of the John Bonet Ramsey puzzle. But it turns out that particular video is I say that to my shame. I would prefer it to be a video that is what's the word? That does take you somewhere, because the whole thing that the housekeeper thought is Patsy isn't my my position on the John Bonet Ramsey case. Love Tina, good having you here. Lisa says, what missing information do you wish was included in the probable cause affidavit? Great question. There's quite a lot. The 12 times that the suspect stalked the residence, it would be nice to know when that was, and did it start picking up after August, or was his stalking more regular after August, or was it kind of random? Was there a pattern to that? I'd also be interested to know what B said, because we only get D's statement. I'd also like to know, didn't D see the perpetrator carrying anything? I mean, surely he had a knife in his hand, and obviously the sheath wasn't over the knife as well. So didn't she see? So the question, didn't D see any blood right in front of her on the perpetrator, on his hands, on his gloves, on his shoes, on the knife itself? If the knife's the silver sort of blade, did she not see the knife and the knife reflecting in the blood on the knife? Did she not see the footprints, bloody footprints coming from the room? You know, and also, what did she do right after that? That's sort of not disclosed. What other missing information? I believe that there's additional DNA. So I would be curious to know if Brian was injured. So if Brian did commit this crime, if he was injured, and if he was injured, then surely there was other DNA left at the scene. I'd also be interested to know, why is that knife sheath there? Was it pulled off? Because some people have said that it is too, there's no way you'd be able to just pull that off, right? I don't know if I agree with that. In a life and death struggle, I think you could. We don't know how strong the belt was that if he was wearing a belt, and we also don't know how old the sheath was. You know, leather can decay over time. So was that sheath, what's the word? Was it damaged? So did it look like it had been pulled off the belt? Yeah, and I would love to know the text messages from D and B, when they went off and what the content was. And then I guess the most pertinent at the moment is the 911 call, hearing the 911 call, who made it. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Hunter, Ethan's brother. And apparently quite a few people spoke on that call. So it would be interesting to see and hear how they explain the whole, we can't get in, you know, so is there a door that's closed? What do you mean unconscious? What are they seeing? All that kind of thing. How long is the call as well? Any other questions? Timmy, can I put you down? Do you guys agree that I would love to go back into and maybe one of you can do this, go back into my coverage of this and look at what point we started intuiting this idea that someone who committed this crime was coveting. When was the first time that we came up with that? Because we did come up with that. And at what point did we do that? I do remember when we dealt with the vehicle driving by behind the reporter, that I suddenly really had this epiphany of just how exposed that house was. And I think the next video after that was about a peeping Tom. And all of that proved to be the case.
How do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day. No, he covets. And how do we begin to covet? We begin by coveting what we see every day.
Okay, thanks, Lisa, thank you. Inez says, is there no trial we will ever, if there's no trial, will we ever know the answers we seek? Yes, I always find it strange when people are so like, only the perpetrator knows what happened. No, I mean, I've written so many books on so many cases where the information seems so hard to get to, and at the end of it feels like you know 95 or 99% of what there is to know. I mean, we live in an age where the information we have access to now compared to 10, 20, 50 years ago is so much more rich and integrated. I mean, we've got time-stamped social media. long time ago, 50 years ago, you didn't know what someone's browser history was. You didn't know necessarily where their cars drove because you didn't have really CCTV then, not to the extent that we have today. So the knowledge base in true crime, which is like in its golden age right now, it's platinum age even, is incredible. And we can and do know so much more in all of the cases that we cover. And the affidavit, wasn't it surprising just how much came out just from one officer? I think we're going to know a huge amount in this case. I would love to hear what Kohberger's professors say about each other, about other professors, and also about bad Teachergate, and then also about him. What was he busy with? What were they dealing with? What was in their curriculum, etc. I'm sorry, but I haven't written part 2 yet. There are so many book series that I meant to continue. Scott Peterson, I wrote a trilogy, and I meant to write 4 or 5 more books. Sorry, 2 more books in that series. In the West Memphis 3 case, I meant to write 3, 4 books in that case, and I stopped it at the first, after the first one, just because other cases supersede that. In the Casey Anthony case, I was in the middle of book 3, A Veil of Tears, when the Chris Watts case happened, literally in the middle of it, or not the middle, the first third or whatever. In the Madeleine McCann case, I was writing Beach of Light, which would be the final book in that series, in the final trilogy, when events overtook that. One of the few cases that I feel like I dealt with it from beginning to end is the Chris Watts case, where I feel like I don't really have anything more to say about that case. Another case is the Oscar Pistorius case. I've written all that I want to say about that case. But even Stephen Avery, I meant to write 4 or 5 books on that case. I stopped at the second one. So unfortunately, where I am now, also the Everest disaster books, I meant to write 5. I've stopped at 4. O.J. Simpson, I meant to write another 1 or 2. Stopped after the third one. Amanda Knox, I meant to write another 2 books on that. The next one was to be about the Ivorian, and he's just come out of jail, and he's written a book as well. And unfortunately, where I am now is I'm not going to be writing any books, at least for the next 10 years. I hope to, in my silver age, whatever you call it, the twilight years, maybe continue writing. I want to spend from 50 to 60 traveling and not writing books, because it was a very difficult, it was incredible output that time. And I was reading about Danielle Steele, the most one of the most productive, prolific authors in the world, and I think my output exceeded hers. I want to actually talk about her and compared to me in a future book club related to that. My author name is Nick Van der Leek, Vanderleek. When I get back to Canada, sounds good. Okay, Timmy, I think I can bring you back. Thanks. Stephanie's just put my author's page up there if you're interested. But okay, so basically we've ended the analysis. So we're going to just do a little bit of chatting here. So if you feel like you want to go and deal with the text, maybe you can go to another channel. We're going to just have a little bit of chit chat over here, just for the next sort of 5 minutes or whatever. Timmy, we will go for a walk. Don't worry. Let me do this. Timmy, do you want to be part of the chit chat? So something I want to share with you guys, I don't really often do this, but I actually had quite a nice day yesterday. I bumped into my brother, and I just suggested that because he's done a couple of Ironmans, I've done one Ironman, quite a few half Ironmans. I bumped into him and I said, do you feel like going for a mountain bike ride? And so we went for a mountain bike ride, really had a good session, and then went for a swim after that. And he actually said I was just sort of moaning about my work in a way and not being acknowledged in the way I want to be, which I think it was a thousand times worse for Kohberger, that he just felt like he deserved to be acknowledged, but also as a young guy kind of thing. Anyway, and he came up with that quote. My brother said, well, you know what Einstein said about mediocre minds are the ones who violently oppose great spirits. And I thought that was so fantastic what he said there. But yeah, I had a pretty good day yesterday. But anyway, while we were riding, I just said, because he's 2 years older than I am, I just said to him, my brother's an artist, but he's also got his master's, I think, in artificial intelligence. He's got 2 like engineering degrees. And I just said to him, I'm 50 years old and I worked my butt off from 40 to 50, writing books and everything. And I want, like, it's just 10 years until I'm 60. And so I want to use these 10 years to live, to travel, to do the opposite of sitting at home anchored to a desk writing books. I want to meet people and so on. And so in a way, I can kind of intuit Brian's situation, where you reach that point where you've been very much in an academic situation and you want to now enter the world again, but maybe the world isn't ready for you, or you don't know how to connect to that world. But I'm in the same place where I kind of, the next 10 years, I want to be traveling. I don't want to be in even YouTube. I want to semi-retire from, starting really from later this year. I don't mean I'm just going to stop it. I just mean I'm not going to be covering cases like you're seeing right now. This might actually be one of the last cases I cover, to the extent that I do. Touch wood, I mean, there might a case might come around again 2 or 3 years from now, and if I'm not in the Himalayas or wherever, then I'll cover it. It's not that I'm not going to continue this. I just don't want to be covering things 24/7, every waking hour, that kind of thing. I also want to live, kind of thing. And I'm now 50 years old, almost 51. I turn 51 in tomorrow from where I am, the 19th of January. So I want to live, and I sort of recognize that looking at my dog, how he's enjoying life and so on. And I take him everywhere, but I also want an experience of life as well. So I do have YouTube burnout. I definitely do. But it's YouTube burnout on top of writing books, 100 books over 8, 9 years. Right? Do you know what I mean? It's working really, really hard at the end of that period. Plus there was the pandemic and all that kind of thing. So it's that feeling you had during the pandemic, but times it by 10 years. I was in a voluntary lockdown for about 8 or 9 years writing books, right? Thanks for the birthday wishes, but it's only for the 19th. Yeah. So, like after 60, your life is very different. So I really want to use the next 10 years to live, like whatever that means, grow peaches or whatever it is. And I'm sure a lot of that will involve meeting some of you. I've already reached out to some of you that we're going to meet in person and maybe do a bit of a road trip and so on. Maybe we'll do some book signings, we'll see. But away from this eternal introspective view of cases and going on scene like Brian Enton does and being there and, all that kind of thing. Thanks, B. Appreciate it. Book signings, okay. And I want to use my other YouTube channel, the Team Peachtree, as a vehicle, as a platform to inspire you guys on the same kind of journey, a journey back into life, a journey back into the world, a journey that is healthy, right? It's about fruit and sunshine and growth and expansion and health and all those edifying things. If true crime is this journey into the darkness, then Team Peachtree is the journey into the light. And I think it is important to have that side to it as well. Makes sense. I think there is a chance that we may be dealing with, we may think that there's going to be a trial in June, but it's very possible that you could have a situation where Kohberger, assuming he's guilty, realizes that he's got a very strong case against him, that there's the DNA is something he can't argue against, and so why would he try? On the one hand, I think he's smart enough, not smart enough, I guess smart enough to believe in his own hubris that he can and will win the smart contest in court. On the other hand, he's already been humiliated and he may appreciate how poor his chances are. And he might take some kind of plea deal to avoid the death penalty. I mean, that's something that can hold over him, which is, I think, something that they bullshitted Chris Watts about. You can avoid the death penalty and avoid a trial, sign here. And they may offer, I don't think Kohberger is stupid in a legal sense, but it may actually be a smart move to avoid the death penalty. He may also appreciate, as I say, a smorgasbord of evidence against him. The only area where I think he may have a hope is the jury sympathizing with him, and also this idea that did D actually see him, and is D a reliable enough witness, and the contamination of the crime scene. The other thing is we've already determined here that he's persistent. So would he not be persistent in his own defense? He's used to being alone, so maybe he's okay with being in the prison setup. What else is there to do except defend himself? What does Jason Brown say? I spent 20 years traveling the world as a musician. Okay, I found that people and paving stones are the same no matter where you go. They're all the same. Home is the only place that is special. Interesting. Home is where the heart is. Interesting question. Oh, happy birthday, Just Curious. It was your birthday 2 or 3 days ago. Okay, any more questions? Let's take it on to 3 hours and then we're going to call it a day. Thanks a lot, Lorraine. Thank you. Thanks, Joy. Dover says, yeah, that's exactly true. I've been home a lot. Definitely. Thanks, Barbara. I have a little bit of a different view. I live in South Africa, and there are a lot of criminals here, and I think the older you get, the more vulnerable you are to that sort of crime. So I think if you're going to do things, you need to do them before you're regarded as, not that 60s old, but before it's obvious that you are old. I'm 65 and it ain't great. Okay. So I've got 15 years to do something. I've been to South Australia. Are you on Melbourne or Perth? I once did a circuit of Australia. The climate's similar. I think it's a bit hotter than South Africa is, certainly at the moment, and drier, but is broadly similar. I must say your roads and neighborhoods are stunning. Your cities are beautiful. Your transport infrastructure is seamless and lovely. Melbourne, to me, is one of the nicest cities on earth. It really is a beautiful city. I'd love to live in Melbourne, I must say. So that's quite a good question. Maybe that actually points to someone who has a strict moral code or a religious code in a certain sense. You may also been afraid of picking up. You may have been health conscious in that sense as well. It's a good point. That's definitely true. Definitely true. Oh, are you from Perth? Hi, Mia. I went to Perth. I also really like Perth. Great for cycling along the Snake River, right? I think you may have made the right decision. Well, that's hard to say. Watch out, when I was born, Albert Einstein was still alive. I have been to Japan. I've been to Osaka. I wouldn't have minded spending more time in Japan. Japan feels like I've lived in Korea for 4 years. If you live in Korea and you go to Japan, Korea and I hope this isn't insulting, was my experience. Korea feels like kind of almost like a paper plate, and Japan, in contrast, feels a bit like a porcelain plate. It's just like feels like Korea, but it's just slightly, how can I put it? Things run a little bit more smoothly and are a bit more organized, and so on. And having said that, I really love Korea. I love Korean food. I've gone back to Korea after living there, whereas I didn't go back to Japan. I also think yeah, okay, yeah, cherry blossoms. One place I haven't been to is China. I haven't been there. I've landed in Hong Kong, but not beyond that. In fact, when we landed in Hong Kong, it was like we went through a black curtain. That the plane literally went through a cloud of smoke, and you could actually smell it in the airplane. And I still asked the pilot after that, was that sort of dark stuff pollution? And he was like, yeah, can you believe it? Bulgogi, that's it. Joanne says barely made it for the last live. Oh, Mark's also in Melbourne. It's a great city. Are you going to the Australian Open, Mark? Raven says, I lived in Okinawa for 4 years. I'm also sorry I never went to Okinawa. There was a teacher I knew who had actually, yeah, who I think went there on her breaks. And anyway, I wouldn't have. Okinawa is also a place worth going to, I think. Bali, that sounds good. Lucky you. I've also been to Thailand. Laura says, I'm late. What did I miss? You missed the uh, Instagram DMs from Brian, apparently from Brian, to one of the roommates, Maddie or Kaylee, more than likely. Joanne says, I've hiked the Austrian Alps, Germany, Spain, and Italy. I've skied the Austrian Alps. That was incredible. Although it wasn't very good for my relationship because my girlfriend couldn't ski and didn't want to ski. Take my advice, never, if you're in a relationship with someone who can't ski, don't go skiing unless you want that relationship to end. Explore Iceland, cycle the ring road. Trek mountain gorillas. I'd love to go to Iceland, I must say. I know a lot of people are doing that, but I've wanted to go to Iceland since forever. Okay, Laura. Okay, so we're at the 3-hour mark. I think I'm going to wrap up. Timmy, what do you say? When one says, do you sell any signed books? If I come to the States, I might do that. So if you're very interested, then that's how I would do it. Otherwise, not really. Verbal Judo says, I want to visit New Zealand. That's definitely another place I want to go to. I've got a friend in Perth, so it's also, excuse me, it's also another place I wouldn't mind revisiting. Oh, this coffee is really making me burp. Sorry about that. Yeah, it can be unpleasant. Don says, how's your backache? Thanks for the question. It's been with me for the past while. Funny enough, this chair, when I do a live, it's far less than my other computer. When I write scripts, my back kills me, and it's really not good. But exercise definitely helps my back. So, but it's been my constant companion, put it that way. Louise says, Angkor Wat is amazing. Okay. Laura says, I lived in Germany for 11 years. Okay. I had a friend in Germany, went skiing with his pals. I think I was in Detram Zillerstrasse just after the Oktoberfest. I remember I couldn't stop eating his, this is going to sound, isn't the way it sounds, but I was eating his salami or bratwurst. He would go to work. It's a school friend of mine. He would go to work and he just had these like salamis at home, and I just ended up because I could obviously said like you can have whatever's in the fridge, and I would like cut off little pieces of the salami, and it was so delicious. I ended up, I think, eating eventually the whole thing. I just couldn't stop myself. I ate like a small, cut off a little piece, ate that, felt, geez, that was so good, cut off another piece, and eventually ate the whole thing. And they're quite expensive. Dover says, to be honest, Dover, weren't you going to go to sleep? I want to go and see things in the world, like the world's biggest ball of yarn. Okay. What about the Victoria Falls? Would a girl actually come forward and say they slept with them? Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Tinder date came forward. Go to Barbados. Okay. Run the World says, I could talk travel all night. Is Death Valley very hot in May? I know it's like the hottest place on earth, but is it already too hot in May? I do want to go and see Grand Tetons. Terry, right? Good night, Don. Take care. Okay, so I think that's it from my side. May's okay. Okay. Luna says, do you have a recommended? Well, I recommend this book. I recommend you read this book. Can you see? The Scout Mindset, Julia Galev. That would be number one, right? And I would also recommend this book. I've just got the cover here. The Birth and Death of Meaning. And I would also recommend this book. It's not for everyone, but this book over here, quite heavy, but very good. The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. Highly recommend that as well. Have you read Behold a Pale Horse? No. Thought Criminal, are you glad you bought that book? Has it been a worthwhile read so far? I'd be interested to know. Joshua Tree National Park, also love to see that. I'm actually very interested in California. The beaches, the parks, the cinema, you know, that Asian cinema. I'm definitely intrigued by California. And also New York, definitely. Thanks, Terry. I might take you up on that. Oh, that's awesome. So Thought Criminal says that she does recommend this book, The Birth and Death of Meaning. I also think it's a fantastic book. I've ordered so many of Ernest Becker's books, and I've heard people say it's 50 years old. It's incredibly current. It's incredibly penetrating and incisive. It's incredible. Okay. Have I been to Greece? I've always wanted to. I've been to Portugal, and I love Portugal as well. I love Portugal. I also love France. I don't know if France is my favorite country. I think it might be. I wouldn't mind living in France. San Diego. Yeah, I've written about San Diego in terms of the what's her name? I can't believe I can't think of a name. I really feel I can't believe it. What's her name? What's the case that played out in San Diego with the Asian victim? It's not Vanessa. I can't believe it. Can you guys think of the case in San Diego? The island was Coronado, and it was no, not Maya Millet. The Asian victim. Her name wasn't Vanessa, was it? And she was in a relationship with a billionaire cosmeticist. Rebecca, yeah, not Vanessa, Rebecca Zahal. I feel really bad that I've written 2 books on that case and couldn't really remember it. I can see her face and all of that. I just couldn't quite remember her name. Yeah, that's it. I wouldn't mind going to San Diego because I've written about that case as well. Scott Peterson's also in California. Quite a few cases in California. It's weird how there are so many cases, true crime cases in California, and Colorado. For some reason, a lot of cases come up out of those states. You guys noticed that? Good to get your travel tips. Do you think the mountains that can't remember the name there either? What are those names? There's something Poconos, right? Do you think the Poconos in Pennsylvania are worth seeing? We do need a TCRS USA meetup. I should actually try and have a cap printed with like the US flag behind TCRS. You know what I mean? Just like this, but the US flag behind that. The Smokies, okay. I'm also really eager to go to Colorado, Boulder, Florissant, Colorado Springs. That's where the Letitia Stokes case played out. Gannon, Gannon Stokes, right? Gannon Stoke. I really am getting old. I can't even remember cases I've covered. Stork, that's it. That's interesting that Florida is the craziest case. I mean, we have had Gabby Petito and Casey Anthony, pretty big cases there as well. Also Nicholas Cruz, right? Stork, yeah. My only problem with New Zealand is the weather. I don't know if I can handle cold. I know it's cold even in summer and rain. Yeah, I'm kind of a sunshine guy. Adirondacks Mountains, Appalachian Trail. There's so much, if you think about it, there's just so much to see and so much to do. When you start thinking about it, you suddenly feel stressed, like, cheapers, I need to get going, And, I've really been wanting to go to the Himalayas, and there's just been this horrible plane crash there near, I think it's called Pokhara. It's where you land to do the Annapurna circuit, and that's exactly where I want to go. And you actually see the plane. There's some footage on Instagram where you see the plane sort of lurch like this at the last moment, and then out of sight it crashes. And it's like, but I wanted to go there, and now it's like you've got this legitimate fear of flying into this area that's just pretty difficult to fly into. All this travel talk's making me feel homesick. I also wouldn't mind going to Canada, do some skiing there. Yeah. I've been to the Great Barrier Reef. Is yours January 22? So you are a Aquarius. Okay. Thanks, Rosanna. Thank you. Appalachian Trail is beautiful, but not worth to do the entire month-long hike. Okay. I know there was someone who hiked, and it became a Netflix movie or some kind of movie. Someone who hiked all along the California coast. There's supposed to be a big trail down there, and that they made that into a movie. That was also quite compelling. But I like the idea of combining travel with exercise, with motion, physical motion, not just a car moving. Okay. British Columbia. Okay, we'll remember that. Verbal Judo says you are feeling old. Okay. Pacific Crest Trail. Okay. Terry, have you done any of that? Have you done any of the Pacific Crest Trail? I am a Capricorn. We are known to be very hardworking and practical and conservative. But I'm on the cusp with Aquarius, so I am very conservative in certain respects. I think you would agree that this channel is quite conservative. But I'm not conservative in certain other ways that might surprise you. Okay. Niagara Falls. I'm not sure if I'd be interested in Niagara Falls. We've got quite a few waterfalls here. And I feel like I've seen it, like in the movies. Travel to the Oregon coast. Isn't that's sort of north of California, right? I wouldn't mind that looking at that side of the states. Montana. Dover, sleep well. I'm also going to be off. Yvonne says I've gone skiing in Banff. I'd love to ski, but if I'm going to be in the States in summer, I'm not sure if that's possible. Capricorns get younger with time. I think that is true. I think that is true. I don't know if I'm really believe in horoscopes, but I'm certainly aware of them. Put it that way. Tucson, Arizona. I mean, the Jodi Arias case, worth a stop. I've not done that except 2 trailheads near Yosemite. Okay, interesting. Maybe you need to do that, Terry, with me. Pacific Crest Trail, part of it. Hawaii, I've got to say, I've always wanted to go to Hawaii. I always thought I would go to, don't laugh, but I thought I would go to Hawaii as part of doing the Ironman. And I mean, that journey I was on in early 2000. I was training for the Ironman to do the Ironman and then go to Hawaii, and didn't quite work out. I did do the Ironman, but in a way, life caught up with me. But it's still something I'd love to do. Either go to Hawaii or go to Hawaii as part of the Ironman, or both. You know. Well, yeah, it's the same thing. Oh, Area 51. Yeah, wouldn't mind just getting a photo of the sign. And Utah. Yeah, there's a lot going on in Utah. There's a big trial apparently going to happen later this year in Utah. What's the Ironman? The Ironman is a triathlon. It's a 3.8 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer cycle, and then a marathon. TCRS meetup in Hawaii. That actually sounds like a great idea. Sounds like a great idea. Yeah, it is very hard to qualify. It's hard to qualify. I know there's some great triathlons in San Diego, definitely. But at the moment, I can't even run. I've got a damaged knee, so I can cycle and I can swim. So who knows when that's going to be back on the table. I hope still in my 50s. We'll see. Okay, so we don't normally do that. Just a little bit of chatter at the end of this live, but it was actually quite enjoyable. So maybe we'll do it again. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being here. Remember what I said about those notes about the biggest con jobs. Please let me know if you want to order one of these notebooks. We'll put a link in the description or in chat or in the comments. But remember, we're going to keep a running tab on the biggest con jobs because they're going to be more. And then we want to evaluate ourselves and other channels on that score. And that's how one of the ways we're going to continue interrogating this case. So I hope you're going to join me in that process. Sorry to hear Deborah's not feeling that well. I hope you're going to be okay. Our hearts are with you. Stephanie's also hurt her hand. I think fractured her wrist. Is that right? So we also thinking about her and everyone else who's not feeling that great. I'm also not in a terribly great place. The hay fever's gone, but the backache's still there, and other things. But let's try and find our way to the sunshine. My kid says, I want a notebook. Please send the link. Are there any mods that can quickly post a link to the notebook? Stephanie, could you please post a link to the notebook? Fractured wrist and elbow, jeepers, elbow as well. That is hectic. That's from falling in the snow. Karina says, I'm healing, but much better. That's good to hear. Thanks, Laura. I just want to wait for Terry or Stephanie or Sharon to just post a link to the TCRS notebook. And then I'm going to skedaddle. Can you go for a walk? Come to Cortez, Colorado. I'll have to look at what Cortez, Colorado looks like. I've always loved Colorado ever since I read Centennial and watched that series. Just seems like incredible. I don't know. Just seems like incredible state. Oh, nice. Yeah. Mods, can any of you find the link to the TCRS notebook quickly posted in chat? What are my birthday plans? I'm going to have dinner with my dad and family at a restaurant, quite a nice restaurant. Not really anything beyond that, to be honest. Do I ride horses? I used to. The last time I did, I didn't feel like I was very good at it. But when I was a kid, I rode quite a lot. My sister has a horse, and she's pretty expert rider. Good night from Newcastle, UK. Such a pleasure being part of this conversation. Cool. Good to have you here, Jason. Guys, it's only my birthday tomorrow, my time. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here, only tomorrow. Thanks. Make me ghost face for you. Okay. Are you based in Cape Town? What does one eat at a nice restaurant in South Africa? Steak. It's definitely steak. Okay, I think I'm going to have to post the link since I can't see anyone else posting it. So as by the time I do, it'll be out. See if I can find it. I can't find it. Why is it so hard to find? All books. Thanks a lot, Liesel. I am a 1971 baby. Okay, I'm 1972, which is why the whole rocket thing is so awesome, is that they're going back to the moon. They've started that process 50 years later. It's kind of cool and uncool. Like the year I was born, they were like, no more going to the moon. 50 years later, okay, let's go back again. So, yeah. Wow, seems like I missed that. Power of the Dog. Remember that. Don Spencer, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Wow, $50. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Stephanie. So if you want to order this notebook, right, looks a bit like that. TCRS notebook. Then you can get it at that link. Okay. Andy in Bonnie, Scotland. Oh, I must say, I love Scotland. It's one of my favorite countries, and I wrote this book. This entire book is set in Scotland. It's the only fiction book that I've written. So yeah, I absolutely love Scotland. I just love everything about it. Lived in Scotland for a while as well. Not a cold weather person though. Florida is the next launch to the moon, I know. So I have to go to Florida. I definitely want to be in America in April 2024. That's when the launch is happening. They just need to keep it on schedule. I'd hate to go there and the launch is scrubbed. So we'll see. Even Haggis, yeah, Haggis as well. Isle of Skye. In fact, the character in that book I've just showed you, his name's Ogilvy Skye. So yeah. I was born the day that Yuri Gagarin, I think, went into space, triggering the Cold War. Okay. I was born in the summer of '69. Should have been at Woodstock. Okay. Oh, you don't have a credit card. Okay. Well, maybe I can sell you one in person when I come here. Maybe bring a couple of notebooks along. 1966. Yeah. Okay. I think that's another thing that's a little bit different with my channel because we're a bit more serious. We cater to a slightly older crowd. I think a lot of the other channels have younger people watching. I think you guys are mostly 40s to 60. I think most of you are sort of in that age category, with a couple of exceptions. I'm also not trying to be young, hip, and cool. I'm just trying to do true crime. Well, Irish, Polish, Finnish, and Scottish. It's quite a combination. I'm Dutch and British, mostly Dutch though. Oh, that's another place I want to go to is Austin for the Caitlin Armstrong case. Although it's not very popular, I'm very interested in that case. Definitely very interested in that case. I do want to go back to Austria, so I don't know. I don't know if 10 years is enough time to tick off all of those boxes. We'll see. Yeah, my Amazon author page has got all the links to all my books, so check it out. Okay, so that's it from me. Wow, I stayed on here at least half an hour than I thought I would, which is not what I normally do. But I'm going to call it a day now. I just want to thank you guys. I actually really enjoyed this live. It was like quite a schlep, waking up to the story and having to just go from zero to here. But it was actually kind of a pleasure, and you guys have made it worthwhile. So I really appreciate it. I do think our familiarity with everything is growing in leaps and bounds every day. So that's definitely feels like we're heading in the right direction. So that's it from me. I want you guys to have a good night. I hope you sleep well. All of you who have got aches and pains, pay attention to them. Treat it well. Make sure you get rest. That's the best way that your body heals is through rest, through sleep. So make sure you get some. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot, Terry. Thanks a lot to Mods. Thanks, Stephanie, for staying awake for this. Really appreciate you being here as well. Thanks a lot, Mods. All the new members that have signed up, all the new subscribers. I must say, I don't know if I came across a single nasty or what's the word, sarcastic comment even during this chat. And so I really appreciate you guys being such an awesome community. We take things seriously, but we are human beings, and we try and just do things kind of properly without being sort of too on the chin about it, right? We just want to deal with these cases in a way that is appropriate, right? So that's really what you're trying to do. Anyway, welcome to everyone who's new here, and thanks everyone who is part of this community for being here. Thanks a lot, Yvonne. Everybody take care, and I'll see you guys next time. All the best.